Just then, a terrifying scream suddenly echoes through the skies of that peaceful medieval village. Down below, a green-haired bully grabs an elderly man and demands answers in front of everyone. Shouting furiously, the aggressor demands to know if there is an elf living in that region. Next, the brute throws the old man to the ground without showing the slightest bit of mercy. Watching from afar, the residents whisper in fear about the wickedness of that rebel group. Commenting on the danger, a villager says that the evil army is spreading chaos. Meanwhile, neighboring lands are completely destroyed by fire in a terrible attack. At that moment, the delinquent shouts angrily, telling the people to stop staring at the commotion. Walking slowly, someone approaches while the desperate crowd tries to call for the guards. Raising his fist, the aggressor threatens to hurt the poor fallen gentleman even more. Desperate, the old man tries to protect himself from the violent blow he is about to receive. Suddenly, a firm hand appears out of nowhere and stops the bully's punch before it hits the target. With a calm look, the blue-haired youth complains about that awful mess in the street. Surprised, the criminal realizes his attack was easily blocked by a boy. Ignoring the provocation, the newcomer asks if they are looking for the young elf. Smiling wickedly, the brute thinks he will be able to force the answers out of him. Showing no fear, the boy demands to be taken straight to their leader's camp. At that, a vein pops on the criminal's forehead, furious at such boldness. Trying to strike again, the aggressor shouts for the youth not to underestimate him. In the blink of an eye, the aggressor is defeated and falls completely knocked out onto the ground. Lying on the ground, the delinquent is dazed, not understanding the incredible speed of that strike. Shaking the dust off his hands, the youth comments that the other guy was just looking for a beating. Staring intently, the warrior warns that now he is going to test the limits of his endurance. Meanwhile, in a wooden shed, the rebel leader shouts, demanding the prisoner. Slapping the table, the leader complains that his henchmen were defeated by just a child. With an annoyed expression, the man decides that he should handle that situation himself. Suddenly, the door is kicked open with force by the boy, who enters dragging the accomplice. Shocked by the kick, the leader is left open, mouthed upon seeing the intruder right in front of him. At that, all the other delinquents in the hideout stand up, confused by the noise. Holding the hostage, the protagonist asks if he was brought to the correct hideout. Crying in pain, the aggressor begs, saying that it is indeed the correct destination. Squeezing his face, the youth threatens to rough him up even more if he is lying. Just then, one of the accomplices draws a knife and mocks his partner for getting beaten so easily. Turning calmly, the blue-haired boy asks who is the boss of this whole mess. Smiling arrogantly, the leader asks if that kid is the one who lives with the elf. Losing his patience, the youth in blue demands to know the reason they are after his sister. Filled with anger, the warrior realizes that talking to that gang is a total waste of time. At that, he closes the large wooden doors, isolating the entire place completely. Smiling, the delinquents find amusement in that action, not understanding the real danger. Locking the exit, the protagonist prepares to face all of them at once. Holding the hilt of his sword, the warrior warns that he is going to reveal two important things. Pointing his finger, the leader scoffs, asking if that actual weapon is even real. At that moment, the boy grabs the huge iron bar that locked the entrance. Sweating coldly, the leader of the bandits feels an overwhelming pressure coming from the youth. With great ease, he bends the thick metal with his hands while introducing himself. Terrified, the henchmen realize that the intruder possesses extraordinary physical strength. Grinding his teeth, the leader realizes that the situation has turned terrible for them. Desperate, the man orders everyone to attack, claiming that the bar must have been fake. Shouting furiously, the armed henchmen run toward the protagonist in blue. Without moving, the youth just watches the advance of his opponents with absolute calmness. Observing closely, the boy realizes that the enemy group is actually made up of helpless children. Moved by the scene, he notices that the scale of this gang of thieves is smaller than he thought. Concentrating his power, the protagonist activates a glowing blue energy around his legs. At high speed, the youth charges forward, leaving the young thieves confused by such swiftness. Frightened, the leader shouts, not understanding how the boy can move so fast. Rising his aura and wrapped fist, the young man prepares to deliver a powerful punch. Flying toward the target, the warrior decides he must knock out their leader first. Desperate, the leader shouts as he sees the punch approaching, unable to dodge the attack. With a colossal crash, the blow hits the ground, kicking up a curtain of dust in the area. In a panic, the henchmen shout as they see their leader defeated in a fraction of a second. Turning his attention to the remaining ones, the hero warns that they need to learn a lesson. Crossing his arms commandingly, the young man speaks firmly for them to pay attention. With an intimidating smile, the warrior warns that no one should dare to make him angry. In the late afternoon, peace returns to the beautiful wooden house located in the mountains. Inside the cabin, a beautiful elf with long blonde hair talks peacefully. Leaning against the counter, the girl with pointed ears asks if the young man handled everything on his own. Looking affectionately, the elf named Celia asks if she is wrong in her deduction. Smiling bashfully, the young warrior nods and says that those troublemakers weren't worth his time. Sighing, the brother explains that they were speaking badly of her, and he couldn't just stand by and watch. Serving dinner, the elf smiles, remembering that he is only an 11-year-old child who talks like an adult. Sitting at the table eating her meal, the girl asks the reason he took so long. Sitting in the shed, the young man recalls the interrogation with the runaway children. Pulling the cheek of one of them, the youth scolds them, saying they are just troublemakers. At that, the little delinquents thank him while crying and run away out of the cabin. Watching the exit, the protagonist asks the rest of the gang if they aren't going to leave. Sadly, the red-haired children quietly confess that they do not have a home. Thoughtful, the young man realizes that these boys are true orphans who need shelter. Scratching his head, the hero sighs, accepting that he will need to help those homeless children. Resting her face on her hand, the elf listens intently while he explains that he looked for a home for them. Looking at his bowl of soup, the young man says that seeing family, less children reminds him of the past. Smiling, the hero says he wanted to give those little orphans a new chance to start over. Awkwardly, the boy scratches the back of his neck, admitting that saying these things out loud makes him embarrassed. Delighted by his kindness, the elf jumps with joy and hugs him with great pride. Lying on the wooden floor, both recall that 3 years have already passed since their first meeting. Looking at the ceiling, the girl confesses that living this peaceful life by his side feels like a dream. Thoughtful, the warrior wonders what would have happened if they hadn't met. Closing his eyes, the youth dives into his memories of the tragic past he lived through. Back then, the day he found the elf began with a scene of total destruction. Panting, the little hero of the past held his heavy sword while crying in despair. In front of him, the beautiful elf was bound with heavy chains around her neck and wrists. Tired, the little boy ends up letting his heavy iron sword fall to the ground. With no strength left in his legs, he falls to his knees on the ground, completely exhausted. Moved, the chained elf walks slowly toward the fallen boy who is crying. Looking around, the village was destroyed with casualties on the ground on the day the youth lost everything. Running desperately, the girl tried to escape from the hunters who were pursuing her. Looking back, she ran in fear while the henchmen shouted that she wasn't far away. Searching through the rubble, the mercenaries looked for the valuable blonde-haired fugitive. Kicking open the doors of the destroyed houses, one of the armed men continued the relentless search. Shouting furiously, the leader of the criminals warns that she is worth a lot of gold and orders them to find her. Hidden in the rubble, a boy wearing a necklace curls up, afraid of being discovered by them. Carefully, the small necklace opens, revealing a beautiful portrait of a smiling woman. New lines, but suddenly a cruel hand pulls that jewelry from the boy's neck, breaking the chain. With that, the brute holds the rope and shouts, threatening the poor resident who trembles with fear. At that, the leader of the criminals gets furious and starts shouting at his accomplices in the forest. Meanwhile, the beautiful chained elf tries to find a safe place to hide from her rivals. Running in a great hurry, the young blonde tries to escape, before those men reach her. At that moment, she manages to open the wooden door and quickly enters the empty shelter. Relieved for a moment, the girl realizes that the wrongdoers haven't discovered her hiding place yet. Suddenly, she hears a strange noise very close by and becomes completely paralyzed with fright. At that, the little blue-haired hero appears, startled, right in front of her inside that cabin. Looking at the young woman, the boy is completely shocked to see the elf's complicated situation. On the outside, the irritated leader of the delinquents decides to use a glowing blue power in his hand. At that instant, the collar on the blonde's neck glows intensely, and she begins to feel pain. Unable to endure the terrible magic, the girl screams in desperation while the cuffs glow. Hearing the scream, one of the henchmen points to the wooden house, warning that she is inside. Fallen on the ground and out of strength, the elf regrets causing so much trouble for the little one. Next, the bandits drag the poor prisoner outside while putting away their weapons. Walking with difficulty, the blonde hopes in her thoughts that the boy stays safe, recalling the moment she had pushed the little boy inside the closet to protect him. But the criminals hear a noise coming from the residence and turn around, startled by the sound. Then, the youth comes out of the cabin dragging a giant sword on the ground and falls to his knees, trembling, crying heavily. The little one is terrified as he faces those dangerous warriors. Seeing that scene, the girl is horrified and wonders why he came out of the closet. Smiling wickedly, the delinquents realize they can sell the boy for a good amount of money. At that, one of the mercenaries draws his weapon and warns arrogantly for him not to try to run. Shedding tears, the hero confesses that he doesn't want to go because his parents are still in the village. Hearing that, the men begin to laugh out loud at the innocence of the little boy fallen on the ground. With a frightening smile, the criminal mocks him, saying he is just a silly child. At that moment, the villain reveals that the evil army destroyed the entire region and defeated everyone. Hearing the terrible news, the youth in blue freezes, unable to accept the truth. Next, the aggressor raises his sword and warns that from now on, they will be his owners. But the little one just lowers his head while holding tightly to the hilt of his heavy metal weapon. Suddenly, the opponent's blood splatters into the air after he suffers a very swift strike. Startled by what happened, the other criminals shout, telling everyone to grab their weapons. With his eyes glowing a bright blue tone, the boy faces the gang with great fury. At that, the tick of the huge blade hits the ground with force, kicking up a massive amount of dust around them. Trembling, the boy realizes that that strange weapon began to move on its own with great power. Backing away in fear, the men wonder if that weapon is actually a cursed object. Sweating coldly, the henchmen comment that such a valuable item could bring a grand fortune. Suddenly, one of the warriors feels the sharp blade right next to his neck and trembles with terror. At that, the leader of the criminals points his sword, ordering his accomplices to take the boy's weapon. Even though they are terrified, the henchmen gulp, knowing they have no other choice but to fight. Shouting furiously, the three warriors run together to attack the little one, who remains motionless. Desperate, the young blonde shouts as loud as she can, telling the little one to run away from there. With a greedy smile, the brute runs with his axe, focused on getting the treasure. But in the blink of an eye, a beam of blue light cuts across the chest of the aggressor, who is left shocked. Moving like lightning, the boy delivers a powerful slash, throwing the opponent high into the air. At high speed, the hero advances, leaving the enemies with no time to react to his blows. Concentrating all the mystical energy into his blade, the boy prepares to finish the fight. Watching everything, the leader of the bandits begins to sweat in terror, not understanding the little boy's strength. At that, the blue-haired boy attacks another henchman, leaving the whole gang quite frightened. Watching the combat, the blonde elf is left open-mouthed, realizing that it is not an evil weapon. Suddenly, the leader of the wrongdoers shouts, telling the youth to stop immediately where he is. With great malice, the leader holds the hostage tightly and threatens to hurt her if the hero takes a step. At that moment, the brute covers the girl's mouth, so she stops trying to warn the boy. Smiling arrogantly, The villain whispers that he would never harm his most valuable product. In his thoughts, the terrible warrior plans to eliminate the little one as soon as he manages to grab the sword. Looking at the ground with sadness, the boy listens to the opponent's provocations without saying anything. Suddenly, the hero prepares himself and extends his arm, ready to make an unexpected move. Surprising everyone, the youth tosses his huge weapon high into the air, leaving the leader confused. At that, the blonde-haired girl ends up being pushed by the bandit, while the item flies through the skies. Finding the boy very foolish, the leader runs at high speed toward the falling object. Leaping greedily, the man stretches out his hand to grab the valuable treasure that is on the ground. But the protagonist reappears in the air right behind him and reveals that it was never a magical item. With the end of the violent battle, the hero falls tired to the ground, next to the defeated opponents. Breathing very heavily, the youth tries to recover his strength after that extreme effort. Shouting in frustration, the boy complains about having gone through so much danger at only 8 years old. Observing his outburst, the elf realizes that the little one won everything using only his pure skill. Recalling the fight, she notes how he used his mind to masterfully deceive the criminals. At that moment, the opponent, a truly that the hero thought was unarmed and defenseless. Taking advantage of their panic, the clever boy picked up another weapon from the ground to finish the combat. Sitting amid the rebel, the young warrior reflects on the tragic fate of his village. Walking slowly, the blonde approaches and asks the reason he risked his life for her. Standing up slowly, the boy replies that he actually didn't act just to rescue her. Looking toward the horizon, he confesses that he just didn't want to see his home destroyed by bandits. At that, the boy turns and asks if the pointed-eared young woman can really use magic. At that moment, the hero mentions that he overheard the criminals' conversation before initiating the attack. Lowering her head in sadness, the blonde confirms that she does indeed possess magical abilities. With a sincere smile, the hero comments with relief that now he believes in divine existence, showing a mysterious glowing blue sphere. The little one proposes an important deal to her. Surprised by the magical object, the girl widens her eyes, unable to believe what she sees. Holding up the sphere, the youth offers her freedom in exchange for one important condition. With a serious look, the hero asks if the elf agrees to live by his side until he grows up. Looking around, the boy explains that he lost his family and has no one else left in the world. Knowing that winter is coming, the young man says firmly that he wants very much to survive. Determined to move forward, the protagonist reveals that his true name is Eldmia. Back in the present, the blue-haired youth is startled to hear someone calling his name in the street. At that, a friendly young man appears behind him and gives him a tight hug, asking the reason for his distraction. Laughing out loud, the friend comments that he heard about his commotion with the village orphan children. Recalling the scene, the resident praises the hero's speed in defeating the delinquents with one blow. With a serious expression, the warrior says that he doesn't feel that as a true compliment. Then, the young man extends his hand and offers a beautiful red apple, leaving the protagonist confused. Smiling happily, the young man says that delicious fruit is just a gift of gratitude. But in the background, the stall owner shouts angrily, telling him to stop giving away merchandise for free. Showing a slight smile, the hero finds amusement in that short and funny argument in the market. Suddenly, a shout calling for the protagonist makes him turn around quickly. In front of him, one of the little runaways is bent over and exhausted, trying to catch his breath. Meanwhile, the other orphans watch the scene with great fear, not understanding what is happening. Worried, the hero asks if something serious happened to make them so desperate. The little girl reveals that very strange people suddenly appeared to capture them. Upon hearing that revelation, the young warrior widens his eyes, feeling immense worry. At that hour, memories of the terrible attack from the past return like a suffocating nightmare. Closing his eyes, the boy remembers all the pain he felt on that great day of destruction. Deeply moved, he recalls the terrible feeling of losing everything without being able to do absolutely anything. But fortunately, That peaceful village became his warm new home after the day of the tragedy, and above all, the blonde-haired elf became the most precious person in his new life. Clenching his fists in fury, Eldmia vows to protect his beloved sister from any kind of threat. With his eyes glowing with anger, the hero decides to find the new enemy's hideout. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, the young red-haired orphan is surrounded by two bandits. Desperate, she shouts, demanding to know the reason those brutes are acting that way. Smiling wickedly, the delinquents warn that she just needs to obey and walk in silence. At that, the mysterious hooded leader comments that the red-haired girl fits the master's orders. Realizing the real danger, the girl notes that those invaders are professional kidnappers. With a wicked smile, the hooded man orders his henchmen to take the hostage away without delay. Pitilessly, the aggressor grips her arm with great strength while the little one tries to resist. But suddenly Eldmia appears, delivering a punch and a violent kick that knocks down the opponents. Startled by the quick intervention, the hooded villain backs away, not understanding what just happened. Relieved, the little girl smiles happily to see that her protector came to save her right at the perfect time. Stepping on the defeated opponent, the hero stares at the hooded leader with a very cold look. With great calmness, the young warrior demands to know the reason they are causing trouble there. Cracking his knuckles, the young man warns that people usually underestimate him because of his age. Furious, one of the accomplices tries to stand up to fight but ends up being knocked out again. At that, the protagonist kneels down near the bandit and orders him to reveal the entire evil plan. Sighing, the hooded boss complains about trusting an important mission to such weak eyes. Raising his head, the young man in blue warns that messing with that orphan is the same as challenging him. With a firm posture, the warrior makes a gesture, calling the opponent into a direct fight. Grinding his teeth, the villain draws his sharp dagger and warns the hero not to get so arrogant. At high speed, the hooded man advances with his mystical blade, delivering a dangerous attack. But to the aggressor's surprise, the clever boy in blue manages to dodge it with ease. Taking advantage of the opening, Eldmia prepares a powerful punch focused on hitting the opponent's face. At that moment, the hero throws a handful of fine sand straight into the eyes of the surprised rival. Shouting in pain, the leader of the criminals covers his face, not understanding when the youth did that. With his vision completely blurred, the aggressor complains that he cannot see absolutely anything. Taking advantage of the distraction, the hero strikes the opponent with a well-aimed blow right in the middle of his face. With the violent impact, the hooded villain flies backward and falls heavily against the dirt ground. Standing in front of him, the warrior comments ironically that he expected more from his techniques. Feeling intense anger, the opponent on the ground curses the boy, promising that he will make him pay dearly. With a gaze consumed by madness, the aggressor shouts, claiming he is going to end his life. Suddenly, the sounds of footsteps approach as several people run in the direction of the fight. Seeing the crowd and the guards arriving, the hooded man realizes that the situation has turned terrible there. Left with no way out, the man quickly grabs a black smoke bomb that was hidden in his cloak. A loud crash echoes through the village as the device explodes, spreading a dark curtain over the area. Coughing because of the gas, Eldmia hears the red-haired girl ask if he is all right in the middle of the mist. Waving the air, the warrior realizes with frustration that the mysterious leader managed to flee the combat. Looking at the henchmen left behind, the young man comments that he was abandoned by his own boss. Activating a terrifying aura, the hero demands that the prisoner tell him everything about the hooded man. Begging for mercy, the man confesses tremblingly that they only followed superior orders. Confused, the hero asks the reason. He is mentioning a supposed young lady of the nobility. Crying, the criminal explains the rumor that a noble girl who survived the war is supposedly in the village. Losing patience, Eldmia crosses his arms and demands to know the true identity of the hooded fellow. With a trembling expression, the criminal swears on his knees that he and his partner are completely innocent. But the protagonist just ties them tightly to a wooden post and warns that he is going to call the guards. Walking slowly, the hero approaches the young red-haired girl named Revi and asks if she is hurt. Trembling heavily, the girl confesses that she is scared to see such dangerous people in the region. At that, the young man calmly suggests that she return immediately to the inn to rest. Looking back, the girl turns thoughtful as she watches the hero walk slowly down the street. Upon entering the familiar local tavern, the blue-haired youth is surprised by the massive noise. At that moment, he realizes that the inn is completely full of customers, chatting happily, running happily. The other orphan children hug the red-haired girl, thanking the warrior for the rescue. Suddenly, one of the little boys points to the hall and asks for help to finish the day's chores. With great dedication, Eldmia and the young girl begin to organize the establishment's paperwork and bills. At that, the owner of the place, named Alisha, appears smiling, thanking the young man in blue for his presence. Scratching the back of his neck, the hero says it was no big deal and praises the business owner's management. But the woman explains with crossed arms that the improvements began after the arrival of the orphans. Surprised, she confesses that the tavern became much busier thanks to the children's hard work. Pointing to the side, the shopkeeper reveals that all the organization was done by the young red-haired girl. Commenting proudly, the lady explains that the girl led the team and helped increase the profits. Thoughtful, Eldmia realizes that the red-haired girl learns things very quickly and proves to be brilliant. Curious, the young man asks the business owner if the girl really knows how to read and write. At that, the woman confirms it, saying that the girl has an excellent command of the account books. Writing calmly under the light of a candle, the red-haired girl demonstrates having a very advanced vocabulary. Recalling the prisoner's rumor, the warrior thinks about the supposed noble survivor of the war. Suddenly, the girl hears footsteps approaching from behind and turns around with a confused expression. Startled, she feels a firm hand suddenly touch her shoulder and lets out a soft gasp of surprise. Without beating around the bush, Eldmia asks directly if she knows the true identity of that hooded man. Nervous, the girl tries to look away and asks, stammering, for him to let her go immediately. Holding her hand, the warrior firmly asks her to accompany him to a private room. Feeling her face burn with embarrassment, the red-haired girl widens her eyes, not understanding that attitude. At that, he quickly pulls her inside the room, closing the wooden door in a hurry. With her heart beating very fast, the young girl leans against the wall, totally nervous about the situation. At that instant, she remembers how incredibly cool the hero looked during the combat. Turning even redder, the girl panics internally, not knowing what he is going to do. Staring intently, the young man in blue approaches slowly with an extremely serious expression. Closing her eyes with great embarrassment, the red-haired girl thinks she is still not prepared for this. But he just asks with absolute calmness the reason she is acting so strangely. Cornering the young girl against the wall, Eldmia asks if she is the missing noble from the rumor. In his mind, the warrior deduces that this important lineage explains the constant attacks. With arms crossed, the boy repeats the gossip he heard from the criminals in the village forest. Trying to hide her nervousness, the red-haired girl questions if he really believes the word of bandits. But the hero recalls her incredible ability to manage the tavern accounts so easily. Remembering the owner's words, he knows that no ordinary child would know how to read and write like that. With an analytical look, the young man states that only someone with a good education since childhood would do this. Sweating coldly, the young girl tries to argue, saying that all those skills are just a coincidence. But the protagonist demands to hear the full story to be able to understand the gravity of the situation. Worried, the red-haired girl clenches her own fist, knowing that the danger could return at any moment. Looking down, she apologizes and says she still doesn't feel ready to reveal her past. Scared, the girl asks what the blue-haired youth plans to do from now on. Then, he reveals his plan to go into the forest to wipe out those bandits heading out. Astonished by the young man's boldness, the young girl shouts, asking if he is really going to do this alone. But Eldmia warns seriously that she must remain hidden in the inn for safety. Revi reveals that those invaders belong to a dangerous organization of shadow assassins. Even aware of the danger, Eldmia warns that he will not allow these criminals to hurt his companions. Feeling guilty, the young red-haired girl apologizes and regrets bringing trouble to everyone at the inn. Giving a light tap on her head, the boy in blue asks her to stop blaming herself for that situation. With a firm look, the hero states that the fault lies with those cowardly kidnappers acting in broad daylight. Surprised by the affection, the red-haired girl widens her eyes and feels her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Clenching his own fist, the warrior promises that he is going to solve that mess no matter what it takes. Smiling with confidence, the protagonist warns that he is much more powerful than the enemies imagine. In the silence of the dark night, the full moon shines intensely over the large trees of the neighboring forest. Gathered around a campfire, the bandits argue angrily about the failure of the previous mission. Sitting on a wooden box, the henchman tries to calm his companions, saying that not all is lost. Grinding his teeth, the hooded leader rages furiously that he will personally eliminate that insolent brat. With a serious expression, the older ally reminds everyone that they need to await the master's orders. Smiling wickedly, the hooded man mocks his partner, claiming he has no right to lecture him. Suddenly, a strange noise coming from the bushes causes everyone to go on maximum alert in the camp. Holding firmly to the hilt of his dagger, the boss orders the henchmen to check the source of that noise. Searching the dense brush with their weapons drawn, the mercenaries try to find the mysterious intruder. Thinking it is just a wild animal, one of the warriors suggests that they return close to the fire. Emerging from the shadows like a blue flash, the blue-haired youth attacks by surprise in the middle of the darkness. With a quick and precise slash, the hero strikes the first opponent before he can defend himself. Startled to see his partner defeated, the other delinquent shouts in desperation, asking who is there. Turning his back calmly, the blue-haired youth focuses his glowing gaze on the remaining enemies. Feeling sweat drip, the hooded leader realizes furiously that the little one actually found the idiot. Shouting desperately, the boss orders all the henchmen to attack together to finish off the boy in blue. Moving with agility, the hero easily dodges the sword strikes of the enraged mercenaries. In a fraction of a second, Eldmia delivers another swift blow that sends another opponent crashing to the ground. Drawing a blue arc in the air, the protagonist defeats two warriors at once with extreme ease. Concentrating his mystical power, the boy prepares to face the hooded leader who is left at the scene. Running at high speed, the youth creates a glowing trail, advancing directly against his opponent. At that, their weapons clash with force, generating bright sparks that illuminate that dark forest. Forcing the blade, the villain realizes that the physical strength of that boy is something completely out of the ordinary. Leaping acrobatically, Eldmia executes another quick attack and leaves the enemies disoriented. Sweating coldly, the hooded man wonders who this monstrous child is that fights with so much skill. Smiling from the side, the hero comments that he finally found the coward who fled from him earlier in the village. Overcome by hatred, the leader charges toward him, promising that he will close that cheeky mouth forever. The clash of swords generates a colossal impact, kicking up dust and shaking the trees around them. Widening his eyes, the hooded man feels a strange energy and realizes there is something wrong with that power. Floating in the air, Eldmia emanates a glowing aura, making the adversary notice that it is pure magic. In that world, ordinary humans need to channel mystical energy to cast spells or reinforce their bodies. Completely shocked, the villain tries to block the blow, thinking it is impossible for a kid to have such control. But the hero simply moves his blade, enveloped in a dense bluish flame, toward the opponent. Surprisingly, the boy reveals that he is capable of utilizing spiritual force directly and without refining it. With a devastating move, the protagonist delivers the final blow and hurls the bandit's boss far away. Looking at the fallen rival, Eldmia mocks his courage for trying to face him with that low level. Without giving much importance to the defeated man, the blue-haired youth sheathes his weapon and sighs with relief. Trembling with terror, the last surviving henchman curls up on the ground, knowing his fate has been sealed. At that, the boy lifts him by the collar with great ease, making the poor guy shout out of pure fear. With a terrifying look, the hero orders the prisoner to immediately reveal who sent that group. In a great hurry, the young man mentions that he needs to return home soon before his elf sister gets angry. But suddenly a loud crash echoes, and a colossal red dragon emerges from the skies, roaring under the full moon. At that, the young man in blue takes a leap backward, totally shocked to see the enormous red creature. Holding firmly to his iron sword, the hero blocks the violent advance of the fire-breathing monster's mouth. With gigantic wings, the beast lands in the forest, leaving the prisoner trembling with terror on the damp ground. Observing the beast, the boy comments thoughtfully that this is the first time he sees a legendary being up close. Knowing about the legends, he remembers that these winged reptiles are the fastest means of transportation in the world. Grinding his teeth, Eldmia concludes that only powerful riders would manage to tame a beast so strong. But at that instant, a sudden thought crosses the boy's mind, and his eyes widen in surprise. Looking around, the protagonist notices that there is another wooden carriage hidden near the trees. Startled, the pile of the creature looks back upon realizing that smoke has begun to spread through the area. With his gaze glowing, the hero threatens the pilot, demanding to know the whereabouts of the other red, winged reptile. Sweating coldly, the enemy confesses that the captain named Delta used the other monster to escape from there in a hurry. Annoyed, the young man realizes that the leader of the assassins predicted his moves and used the henchman as bait. At that moment, the hero goes into shock as he understands that that entire plan served only to lure the red-haired girl away. Meanwhile, the young red-haired orphan is unconscious in the middle of the darkness in an unknown location. With great agility, the kidnapper carries the girl on his shoulder while climbing onto the saddle of the gigantic creature. Thoughtful, the man in the blue hood realizes that the village guards fell easily into his perfect trap. Waking up little by little, the prisoner tries to move but notices that she is completely tied up by thick ropes. Looking around, the girl falls into despair upon realizing that the strong wind indicates she is up in the clouds. Flying high through the skies, the red monster crosses the mountains and forests at an impressive speed. Shouting against the wind, the girl asks in fear if they are really riding on a legendary being. Angrily, the red-haired girl questions the honor of that imperial knight for agreeing to do such a cowardly job. Without showing remorse, the hooded mercenary coldly warns her to stay quiet if she doesn't want to fall from there. Beating its powerful wings, the red giant continues its rapid journey toward the planned destination. Confident, the young red-haired girl warns that her friends from the tavern will soon notice her disappearance and send urgent help. But the aggressor gives a dark laugh and says that no one in the village was left alive to be able to go after them now. Widening her eyes with terror, the little girl tries to understand the meaning of those terrifying words. At that instant, she imagines the terrible scene of the tavern catching fire with her dear friends fallen on the ground. Crying heavily, the little red-haired girl shouts with all her might that the hero will definitely come to save her. Mocking the girl, the warrior states that he left his best men in the brush to finish off the protagonist. In his thoughts, the kidnapper imagines the blue-haired youth fallen and defeated in the middle of that forest. But in her mind, the little girl knows that the enormous determination of her protector would never be shaken by that. Regretting deeply, the red-haired girl cries for involving that innocent boy in her personal problems. With a firm tone, the abductor warns that she will soon forget these ordinary people as soon as they arrive in the capital. But suddenly, the writer looks at the sky and becomes completely paralyzed upon seeing an enormous bluish glow. Falling from the clouds like a meteor, the young warrior appears wielding his sword and wrapped in spiritual flames. With a devastating slash, the hero strikes the back of the red creature, generating a massive shockwave. Desperate, the pilot wonders how that boy managed to jump from a height much greater than the flight itself. Trembling with terror, The man can barely believe that a mere child defeated the legendary monster with a single blow. Landing with agility on the back of the winged reptile, the boy in blue prepares to continue the attack. At that, their blades clash in the air, generating an overwhelming pressure as the two face each other with fury. With great determination, Eldmia uses all his mystical strength to push back the dangerous opponent's weapon. The aerial combat intensifies while the large, injured beast begins to lose control in the middle of the clouds. Startled, the abductor wonders if the hero went mad by starting such a risky battle up so high. Delivering another powerful blow, the youth cuts the wing of the winged giant, which begins to plummet rapidly. Even while falling, the two continue exchanging swift attacks with their swords, generating bright sparks in the air. Desperate, the aggressor tries to find some way to survive as the free fall approaches the ground. Controlling his panic, the kidnapper tries to devise a quick plan to secure the hostage and escape from there alive. Activating his purple mystical energy, the hooded warrior vows that he will not be defeated like his subordinates. With quick movements, the protagonist cuts through the waves of enemy power, using only his bright blue blade. Feeling the impact of the clashing swords, the blue-haired boy makes a great effort not to back down. At that, the hooded villain emanates a strong purple energy, while mocking the strategy of the boy in blue. With his blue eyes glowing, the hero advances upside down to deliver a direct attack on his rival. But the dangerous warrior delivers a swift sword strike, trying everything to eliminate the young man in blue. At that moment, an extremely bright golden light appears in the sky as the hero kicks with immense force. With that, the villain covers his own face, quite bothered by that sudden glare that blinded him. He realizes with a start that the rival calculated the sunrise to gain a perfect opening for an attack. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist lands a violent strike and makes the opponent realize he was foolish. Holding the red-haired girl in his arms, the hero warns that they have no time and tells her to hold on tight. Desperate, the girl begins to shout in terror, not understanding where they are going so fast. Then, both land safely right on top of the back of that gigantic red-winged reptile. Joyful, the dragon's pilot shouts, thinking the plan worked, and asks if he is now free of accusations. At that, the girl thanks him with relief and asks if the blue-haired youth is all right after the difficult combat. But suddenly, she notices that his shirt is torn, with a lot of blood dripping from a wound. He gets frustrated for being hit in that millisecond by the rival's skillful counterattack. Startled, the young girl shouts desperately upon seeing the young man lose his strength and begin to pass out by her side. While the dragon flies toward the horizon, the girl's scream of desperation echoes loud through the skies. Suddenly, the protagonist opens his eyes with a start and tries to understand the place where he just woke up. Looking around, he realizes that he is lying in his own bed in the peaceful wooden cabin in the forest. With a confused look, the young man observes the elf asleep by his side and notices the fatigue on her face. Holding her hand, the young man wonders if his dear sister stayed taking care of him the entire time. At that moment, the blonde begins to wake up slowly and opens her beautiful blue eyes upon feeling his touch. Taking a leap of joy, she celebrates greatly to see that her brother finally woke up from that slumber. Feigning annoyance, the girl complains about how much worry he caused while the hero apologizes. Next, she hugs him with great affection, confessing that she is extremely happy to see him safe. Returning the hug, the protagonist smiles from the side and apologizes for making her go through all this fright. Pulling away, the elf reveals that the red-haired girl was also very worried and came to visit him every day. Suddenly, the cabin door opens, and the young red-haired girl enters, freezing in shock upon seeing the young man awake. Running without hesitation, the girl throws herself into his arms, relieved to see her savior finally recovered. Crying heavily, she begins to give light punches to his chest, complaining that the dummy slept for 3 days. Observing the funny scene, the blonde sister begins to laugh out loud while the two continue that bickering. Changing the subject, the blue-haired young man comments on the elegant noble clothes she is wearing. Smiling proudly, The girl asks if the new look actually made her look like royalty, but soon her face turns quite serious as she reveals that there is an urgent matter to discuss. At that, the young red-haired girl tightly holds the protagonist's hands with great affection, gathering the courage to speak. Without beating around the bush, the girl makes a special request, asking if the hero agrees to accompany her to the royal capital. Waving his hand, the blue-haired youth refuses right away, leaving the little one quite outraged. He explains calmly that he possesses a very important goal and needs to train to become strong, but she insists, saying that the royal knights can teach him to fight better than anyone there. With that, the hero thinks of the immense power of his elf master and states that he does not need another tutor. Staring intently, the red-haired girl questions what he would do if someone even more powerful than the elf existed. Suddenly, an enormous warrior in golden armor enters the room, interrupting their conversation. Smiling, the hero finds it funny, commenting that a strong warrior would never waste time coming after him. But to the young man's surprise, the colossal golden knight appears right behind him with a serious expression. Widening his eyes, the blue-haired hero is completely paralyzed upon noticing that presence. Trembling greatly, the young man wonders how the intruder managed to approach without emitting any energy. Stepping to the front, the young man demands to know who the intruder is, but the red-haired girl asks him to calm down. Walking slowly, the girl passes by her protector and greets the great warrior by his name. With a slight smile, the knight says he is very relieved to see the young noble completely safe. Revealing her true identity, the red-haired girl is introduced as the important heiress of that kingdom. Shocked, the blue-haired hero is left open, mouthed upon discovering his new friend's title of nobility. At that moment, the hero looks at the map and realizes that the girl's territory is immense compared to his. He is surprised to understand that his friend belongs to an extremely powerful lineage of nobles. With that, the boy notices that her importance in the royal capital is much greater than local rumors said. Observing everything in silence, the imposing warrior in golden armor fixes his gaze on the blue-haired youth. Then, the armored man asks directly if the boy before him is indeed the hero of that village. At that, the newcomer says he is impressed that a boy so young can manipulate spiritual power, but the protagonist replies with ignorance, stating that his skills are none of his business. Annoyed, the young man asks where this knight was while the young noble was in danger in the forest. Feeling guilty, the red-haired girl interrupts the argument and shouts, saying that the whole mess was her mistake. With that, her protector warns that that is a political matter and no stranger should get involved in it. Hearing that, the protagonist shouts angrily, refusing to be called a stranger by the opponent. But the big guy proposes something different, saying that the situation would change if the boy became his disciple. At that, the red-haired girl confesses that she brought the guest precisely to make this important training proposal. She explains that the man is the legendary third shield of the king, and one of the most powerful warriors in the kingdom. Facing the boy, the warrior reveals that he has already investigated the blue-haired youth's entire past before. He comments that he learned of the little one's fights against criminals and his warnings for them not to anger him. Then, the man mentions the loss of the boy's parents in the old war and his enormous desire for vengeance. Upon hearing that, the protagonist grinds his teeth with anger for seeing his secret exposed in that manner. Unable to control himself, the furious youth drives his foot into the ground and charges at high speed to attack. Shouting with hatred, the hero tries to land a powerful punch on the knight's face to make him shut up. But with extreme ease, the imposing warrior stops the boy's strike, using only one of his hands. He advises the little one not to act out of emotion, because that makes his strikes easy to predict. At that, the astute hero breaks free and quickly delivers another punch focused on hitting the rival's defense. Utilizing his incredible agility, the blue-haired youth leaps to get a better angle. Observing the move, the warrior flashes a slight smile upon noticing the great technique of that attack. With that, the hero hits the opponent's block, generating a strong impact that kicks up dust in the room. Smiling with pride, the boy celebrates for managing to connect a strike against the strong rival. But suddenly his eyes widen as he feels that the situation was actually not in his favor. At that, the armored knight praises the boy's technique while holding his kick without any effort. Next, the man pushes the protagonist, who falls sitting on the wooden floor, tired from the effort. Then, the giant points to the wound on the hero's rib, warning that he cannot fight like that. Annoyed, the young man shouts that the title of King's Shield is worth nothing if he didn't protect the red-haired girl before. But surprising everyone, the armored warrior agrees, saying that they do fail to protect people. He shares that there are many innocent people suffering because of the demon army, and it is impossible to save everyone. With that, the knight places a firm hand on the blue-haired boy's shoulder and reveals that there is only one solution. With a determined look, the giant states that the only way out is to annihilate the fearsome enemy army. At that moment, he explains that he needs to recruit talented and strong young warriors for this mission. He offers training to the hero, promising to make him strong enough to achieve his vengeance. Feeling the weight of that proposal, the youth presses his lips in silence, trying to make a decision. The next day, the boy in blue walks thoughtfully through the forest toward his elf master. At that moment, the hero focuses his gaze on her, knowing that conversation will be quite difficult for both. Approaching slowly, he calls for the blonde with a very sad and reluctant tone of voice. With a slight smile on her face, the girl asks if the boy has truly decided to leave with the others. She confesses that she was already expecting this farewell, but didn't imagine she would say goodbye so soon. At that, the hero explains that he needs to go to train and will do whatever it takes to gain more power. Holding his chest with emotion, the boy expresses gratitude for all the happy moments they lived together in the cabin. Looking affectionately, the elf smiles with pride upon seeing how determined and mature the boy has become. But she interrupts him gently and calls him by his affectionate nickname, leaving the young man surprised. Opening her arms with joy, the blonde asks for a tight farewell hug before he leaves for good. Without saying a single word, the hero just observes the beautiful gesture of affection from his dear protective sister. At that, the two hug each other tightly at the top of the mountain, sealing that difficult promise of farewell. The next day, the royal carriage continues its swift journey down the long dirt road toward the enormous capital. Sitting inside, the boy observes the gold earring he received as a gift from his dear elf sister. Curious, the red-haired girl asks if he has always worn that shiny accessory on his left ear. He explains that the object was a special gift to ensure that an important promise is fulfilled. Turning red with embarrassment, the little red-haired girl asks, stammering, about the content of that promise of theirs. But the youth in blue just smiles and says it is a big secret, leaving his friend even more curious. Observing from afar at the top of the hill, the beautiful elf wishes her brother a good journey in her thoughts. A short time later, the carriage finally arrives at the immense palace of the Ogader family in the grand capital. Inside, a young blonde warrior trains angrily, knowing that her father accepted a stranger as a student. At that moment, the blonde crumples the paper with great force, unable to understand the patriarch's decision. With a lot of anger, she firmly holds the hilt of her metal sword, promising to test the intruder personally. With a sharp gaze, the girl vows to show the boy in blue the true strength of her lineage. Meanwhile, the carriage proceeds peacefully along the tree-lined road that leads to the mansion's entrance. She explains to her friend about the great political division of the country and the real reason they tried to kidnap her. Since she is the sole survivor of her lineage, the criminals wanted to use her as a control puppet. At that, the young noble deduces she would be used as an important piece in the grand conflict against the kingdom. Intrigued, the blue-haired boy asks the reason she didn't ask for direct help from the royal guards. With seriousness, she states that she needs to personally lead the reconstruction of her entire old lineage. At that, the girl flashes a slight smile on her face, commenting that most people love dramatic stories. She explains that fleeing to the castle would make her just another survivor worthy of pity in the kingdom. But surviving alone in the real world would create a very strong narrative to win the people's support. With that, she would return as a great legitimate leader after spending years hidden, overcoming difficulties. Smiling, the red-haired girl states that this clever plan is the perfect scenario to win over everyone in the capital. Worried, the hero says he understands the strategy, but all of this still seems to be extremely dangerous. At that moment, the Golden Knight agrees, saying that the girl refused to reveal her head eye out to them. Laughing, the young girl confesses that she wanted to solve everything on her own, but in the end, she ended up being saved by the boy in blue. Flashing a sincere smile, the hero replies that the important thing is to see her safe and sound at the end of the day. While they converse, the carriage finally passes through the grand gates of the immense noble property. Controlling the Reins, the strong protector warns calmly that they are about to reach the destination. At that, the large wooden wheel stops on the stone pavement, indicating that the journey has finally ended. Standing in front of the mansion, the gigantic white palace appears extremely imposing under the blue sky. With that, the luxurious transport parks in the castle's central courtyard, waiting for the passengers to step down. Looking through the glass window, the young man in blue greatly praises the beauty of that grand residence. Curious, the red-haired girl asks how the health of an old classmate named Cheryl is. But the knight sighs, commenting that lately his daughter has been going through a rebellious phase. Suddenly, the vehicle's wooden door is opened in an extremely violent manner by someone from the outside. Shocked, the blue-haired youth is startled to see the young blonde warrior standing before them. With her purple eyes glowing in fury, the girl focuses her gaze directly on the newly arrived hero. At that moment, silence takes over the place, while both stare at each other with great suspicion. Losing patience, the protagonist in blue breaks the silence and demands to know the identity of that intruder. Furious, the blonde shouts with all her might, confirming if the young man before her is the village hero. But quickly she changes her attitude and greets the young noble, demonstrating total respect. Right after that, the girl goes back to shouting at the protagonist, challenging the youth to an urgent duel. Seeing that embarrassing scene, the armored knight covers his face and lets out a long sigh of embarrassment. He tries to smooth over the situation, saying that the friendly combat will help the two form a strong bond. At that, the boy in blue just smiles, stating that his body is stiff from spending so much time sitting. With a very confident look, the youth accepts the challenge, eager to test the opponent's level. Facing each other in the castle's central courtyard, both wield their swords, ready to begin the combat. Worried, the red-haired girl questions if they shouldn't stop the duel, but the knight says this will teach them. At that, the big guy gulps, knowing that no one could actually stop his blonde daughter's stubbornness. Concentrating, the young warrior assumes her combat stance, completely ignoring everything around her. At high speed, the blonde advances, delivering a horizontal strike focused on hitting the boy in blue. But with quick reflexes, the hero raises his training blade and blocks the opponent's violent attack. Forcing the metal, she shouts with hatred, telling the youth to pack his things and go back to his peaceful village. Annoyed, the young man hits back, saying that her own father was the one who begged him to accept the invitation. With that, the two weapons clash again, generating bright sparks that light up the entire palace courtyard. The combat intensifies with both exchanging swift and precise strikes without showing any sign of fatigue. At that, the blonde-haired young woman executes a low sweep to try to unbalance the enemy's defense. But with agility, the protagonist leaps over the blade, escaping the strike with great style in the air. Noticing the leap, she focuses her gaze toward the top, planning the next move against the hero. Without wasting time, the blonde delivers an upward slash to hit the boy in blue while he falls. But she notices that the opponent managed to dodge the strike with ease, using his rapid physical reflexes. With that, the young warrior lands, using only one hand on the ground while blocking another direct attack. At that, the blonde smiles, thinking she finally managed to corner her opponent's defense in the courtyard. With a lot of strength, she raises her heavy iron weapon, ready to apply the final blow of that dispute. But the clever hero slides his foot quickly across the dirt ground and masterfully dodges the heavy impact. Moving like lightning, the youth appears right by her side and delivers an extremely fast counterattack. The impact causes the two blades to clash with so much force that the girl's weapon flies far into the air. At that moment, the hero in blue rests the tip of his sword right against her belly, finishing the combat. Completely shocked, the young warrior is left paralyzed, unable to believe the speed of the strike. She wonders how a village boy managed to move with such precision in a few seconds. At that moment, the blonde stares at the tip of the opponent's weapon, feeling immense frustration with the defeat. With that, the hero gives a light tap on the adversary's forehead with his wooden sword, making her complain. Looking with disdain, the hero asks if the little blonde is finally satisfied with the result there. But she begins to shout angrily, claiming that the opponent should finish that fight for real. Moving away, the protagonist in blue explains that he never had the slightest intention of offending her father. He states that he risked everything, he had to come to the capital, and will not return until he becomes very strong. With a friendly smile, the young man extends his hand, inviting the adversary to train along with him. At that, the purple-eyed girl stares at the protagonist's extended hand, feeling quite surprised. Slowly, she stretches out her arm and accepts the handshake, sealing a new alliance between the two. But right after that, the blonde huffs in annoyance, promising that the youth will give up on training in 3 days. Observing the new bickering in the courtyard, the red-haired girl and the armored knight smile, noting their similarity. Determined, the blue-haired boy clenches his fists and vows that he will train much harder from now on. In the silence of his room, the youth begins an intense routine of daily physical workouts with push-ups. With that, the young man shows absolute focus, forcing his physical limit even inside his noble quarters. A short time later, the hero trains in the forest under the watchful supervision of the legendary Golden Knight. At that, the boy delivers slashes with his bright blue energy blade against the wooden dummies. To increase his muscular strength, the young man pulls a gigantic rock tied to his back in the woods. In the late afternoon, the protagonist in blue collapses exhausted onto his soft bed after the extreme effort of the day. With the passage of time, the seasons of the year change rapidly, while the forest leaves fall to the ground. At that, the duo continues training diligently in swift duels amid the beautiful autumn scenery. Displaying determination, the hero focuses his gaze on his blade, controlling fatigue and his rapid breathing. Eventually, the harsh cold of winter arrives, covering all the tree branches with white snow. But even under the freezing snow, the barefoot hero emanates a strong blue mystical energy around his foot. Shirtless, the young man in blue trains in the icy woods, showing incredible bodily and spiritual control. With that, he lets out a long, icy sigh, focused on reaching the peak of his physical abilities. Finally, spring returns, opening a beautiful blue sky with new green shoots budding on the branches. At that moment, a small flower bud begins to bloom under the sunlight, indicating a new beginning. And with a lot of sweat dripping through his hands, the hero continues firm in his heavy routine of push-ups on the ground. At that moment, a shout coming from outside the room tells the youth to hurry up with his morning training. At that, the blonde opens the door without knocking, complaining about his obsession with daily physical exercises. She demands that he get ready quickly so they don't miss the best missions from the Adventurers Guild. Drying his sweat with a towel, the hero asks for just 1 minute to finalize his morning preparation. In another part of the forest, the sunny day illuminates a wooden cabin that is quite isolated from everything. Inside the place, a man celebrates happily while holding a large bag of gold coins. At that, the thieves gather around the table, proud of the high-value robbery they pulled off yesterday. The boss of the gang laughs out loud, stating that the royal capital is packed with wealthy people to rob. With that, the leader orders a few more thefts before they beat a retreat because of the adventurers. Mockingly, he jests about the victims who just beg for their lives and leave their entire fortune behind. But suddenly, a mysterious female voice arises in the place, calling the group trash with much contempt. Walking slowly, the hooded intruder comes out of the shadows, criticizing the foolish pride of those thieves. At that, the young blonde appears behind the boss, resting the blade of her sharp sword right against his neck. Sweating coldly, the leader of the gang falls into despair for not feeling the girl's stealthy approach. Startled, the henchmen shout, asking if she was sent there on an official guild mission. Angrily, she tells everyone to shut their mouths and shouts, calling her partner in blue to finish the fight. Desperate, the criminals order the protection of the doors and windows upon learning that there is another intruder coming, but the blonde just grinds her teeth and whispers in a hurry, telling her friend to act once and for all. Hidden on the ceiling beam, the hero in the brown hood observes the target well below him without making a sound. At that, the henchman looks up suddenly and goes into total panic upon noticing the danger above him. Leaping like a feline, the youth delivers an extremely violent downward strike with his weapon. With that, the remaining delinquents run armed in the direction of the boy, shouting in a furious manner. Moving with agility, the hero delivers precise slashes, knocking down several opponents all at once. At that, an obese man tries to attack from behind with his heavy axe, focusing on eliminating the intruder. But the hero masterfully rotates his body, changing his axis of movement in a fraction of a second. With that, he lands a kick of blue mystical energy right on the face of the adversary, who flies far away. Facing the next target, the warrior with glowing blue eyes advances fast with his sharp blade. Next, the hero applies a well-aimed slash to the chest of the last henchman, who falls unconscious to the ground. Seeing his entire gang defeated so easily, the boss falls from his chair, trembling out of pure terror. In the end, silence returns to the cabin, while the hooded young man sheathes his weapon, surrounded by fallen enemies. Crying heavily, the cowardly leader begs on his knees for the two youths to spare his life there. He promises to give all the stolen money in exchange for mercy, but the girl stares at him with disgust. With disdain, the hero in blue warns calmly that a coward like him isn't even worth the effort to eliminate. He explains that he needs to bring the prisoners alive to the guild as physical proof of the mission's success. But in return, the hero cracks his knuckles with a laugh and warns that he is going to give him an unforgettable beating, so he learns. With a terrifying look, the young man prepares his fist, stating that he will never forget his rival's name. At that, a desperate scream of pain echoes loudly from inside the cabin, startling the forest birds. The next day, the heroes return to the Grand Adventurers Guild located in the royal capital. Joyful, the receptionist confirms the success of the request and hands a large bag of gold coins to them. Holding the reward, the blue-haired hero smiles from the side, thanking her in a very friendly manner. At that moment, he calls his friend to leave but notices that she is focused on reading another pamphlet. She explains that the long vacation is going to start tomorrow, and for that reason, she wishes to take a grand guild mission. Curious, the boy takes the paper and wonders the reason there are so many escort requests lately. With that, the blonde explains that the new task is large-scale and will need many strong warriors. But the hero fears that her master will refuse travel permission, though the girl claims to have a good idea. In his mind, he imagines the young blonde blackmailing her father with childish tantrums to get what she wants. Walking along the commercial street, both don't even notice that a mysterious hooded man observes them from afar. From high up in the window, the figure asks the guild master if that boy in blue really is the hero. Sitting at his desk, the administrator confirms it, saying that the young man appeared out of nowhere and demonstrated great talent. With an enigmatic smile, the boss reveals that the protagonist is merciless and earned the nickname of Mad Dog. From above, the mysterious hooded spy agrees and says that the boy's skills are indeed real. At that moment, he focuses a watchful gaze on the young man in blue, demonstrating a great interest in fighting him. With a confident smile, the hero just mocks the scary nickname he received from the other adventurers. 2 days later, the band of fighters gathers at a camp on the outskirts of a capital vineyard. Observing the movement, the protagonist in blue asks his friend if that strange fellow is the client. At that, the girl explains that the man with crossed arms is a wealthy baron who bought his title of nobility. Thoughtful, the The hero finds amusement in that story without showing the slightest sign of respect for the noble. Suddenly, the local guide gestures a lot and asks for everyone's attention to explain the details. Pointing toward the horizon, he reveals that the gang of thieves is hidden in the ruins of that forest. With that, the speaker proposes a simple strategy to form a single line and attack the opponents together. But the protagonist immediately suspects that foolish plan, which seems more like an obvious trap. He notes that advancing in a straight line across an open field, like that would leave the group of warriors defenseless. At that, other fighters shout angrily, claiming that it is madness to attack without knowing the rival plan. Whispering, the blonde says she is feeling something very strange, and the boy in blue agrees with her. Both begin to suspect that the gray-haired baron is actually planning something very malicious. Nervous, the organizer tries to calm the spirits, saying that the tactic was just a flexible suggestion. With an arrogant posture, the noble just watches silently, pretending not to care about the men's rebellion. At that, the spokesperson smiles loudly, revealing that his client has an excellent bonus reward proposal. He offers 5 additional silver coins to each one who agrees to lead the charge into the forest. Hearing the high value, one of the greedy warriors tightly holds the hilt of his sword, ready to fight. With that, all the others begin to cheer loudly, forgetting the danger, only focused on getting the cash. Observing the group's greed, the organizer flashes a malicious smile, knowing his plan worked, but suddenly his eyes widen upon realizing that 2 youths there did not move with the crowd. Laughing, the blue-haired hero warns that he prefers to act independently, since he doesn't need the bonus. With a mocking tone, the young man asks if there is any kind of problem with them fighting on their own. Desperate, the spokesperson tries to stammer some convincing answer, while his forehead fills with sweat. At that moment, he shifts his trembling gaze toward the gray-haired client, looking for help. But the cold noble remains silent, pretending to completely ignore the desperation of his fearful subordinate. He just maintains his rigid posture, demonstrating that he does not intend to interfere in the duo's decision. Left with no choice, the organizer smiles awkwardly and grants permission for the heroes to act freely. But even before he finishes his sentence, he notices with surprise that both have already walked away toward the dense brush. Walking slowly, the blonde comments that attack order is surely a set-up trap. The boy agrees, stating there is no doubt that the wealthy gray-haired baron is plotting something. At that moment, she warns that even though she doesn't know that man's real motives, the situation is dangerous. With a serious face, the warrior states that if they continue like this, all the adventurers are going to die. Meanwhile, the sun's rays begin to light up the interior of the dense and peaceful wooded forest, but hidden behind the large trees, several mercenaries armed with bows await the charge. At that, one of the archers whispers, commenting about the pair of rookies who separated from the large group. Laughing, the hooded enemy comments that the other warriors are marching blindly straight to their deaths. But suddenly, firm boot steps begin to echo slowly through the local quiet dirt trail. Ignoring the danger, the criminal recalls the last massacre and how the invaders begged for their lives. At that, the blue-haired hero draws his sharp metal blade with great speed, ready for combat. The henchman laughs out loud at the thought of seeing the pathetic expressions of the new victims who are coming, but the protagonist propels his body forward, vanishing into the bushes like a shadow, flying through the leaves. The youth delivers an extremely fast diagonal slash against the enemy's guard. Startled, the archers shout in terror, unable to understand how they suffered a surprise attack so fast. At that, the young man in the brown hood shakes the blood off his hand and focuses his sharp gaze on the remaining adversaries. Without hesitating, he runs again, gaining momentum on the wet dirt to deliver another quick attack. At high speed, the blue-haired youth executes precise slashes, knocking down the enemy gang all at once. With that, his blade glows intensely in a mystical blue, revealing the hero's immense spiritual power. At that, the fearless blue-haired youth attacks the opponent by surprise with his glowing sword. Leaping from above, the hero advances toward the rival archer with his magical blade activated. At that moment, the shooter goes into total panic upon realizing that danger is falling upon him. With an implacable look, the boy focuses his blue vision to finish the combat for good. Utilizing his incredible agility, the protagonist easily dodges a swift shot. Frightened, another criminal shouts desperately upon noticing that the intruder is fighting alone. Then, a heavy blow hits the enemy and ends the dispute at that point in the forest. Smiling from the side, the young man in blue comments that he just devised an excellent plan of action, but his blonde partner is suspicious of the idea and makes a face of pure doubt and fatigue. Holding firmly to his dirty weapon, the young warrior confesses that his plan is quite simple. At that, the hero observes all the knocked out enemies on the ground after the quick combat. With plenty of confidence, the boy in blue explains his real intention with that mess. He states that the news of this defeat will quickly reach the ears of the terrible Baron. Next, the young man looks toward the horizon, hoping his friend has found some clue. At that, he spots the last opponent fallen near the tree and plans to retreat from there soon. Walking over to the fellow, the hero gives him a few slaps on his head to make him wake up. Groaning in pain, the injured henchman opens his eyes slowly, not understanding what happened. Smiling in a frightening way, the hero warns that the two are going to have a very serious talk. Meanwhile, in the woods, the hooded girl finds a mysterious hatch in the ground. Curious, she observes the dark entrance that seems to lead to a secret cellar in the forest. With slow and silent steps, the young warrior begins to descend the wooden steps. At that, she covers her nose, bothered by the terrible odor coming from the depths of that place. Suddenly, the blonde's foot bumps into something strange on the damp floor of that room. Feeling a shiver down her spine, the girl realizes she touched something terrifying. With widened eyes, she begins to sweat out of pure nervousness in the face of that situation. At that instant, the girl is horrified to see several bodies of adventurers piled up. Outside in the forest, the hero asks seriously what the gang was collecting. Trembling with terror, the injured prisoner reveals that they were gathering the bodies. Shocked, the young man in blue grabs the fellow by his clothes, demanding to know the reason for that. Annoyed, he shouts, asking why they would do something so bizarre and disgusting. In the dark cellar, the blonde questions herself about the real motive for hiding that there. But suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps coming down the stairs echoes through the enclosed environment. Going on maximum alert, the young warrior realizes she is no longer alone in the place. She quickly hides while watching the shadow of a new enemy approach. With a sharp look, the girl prepares for the worst possible scenario inside there. At that moment, silence reigns around that small isolated cabin in the woods. Meanwhile, the sunny day lights up the beautiful cultivation fields outside the forest. In another spot, a group of heavily armed guards awaits the signal to advance. Approaching, the leader of the henchmen informs the gray-haired Baron that everything is ready. Smiling maliciously, the noble plans to eliminate anyone who survives that mission. With a greedy look, the old man states that that man's plan is finally going to work. But suddenly, a messenger arrives running desperately to report an emergency. Shocked, the Baron widens his eyes upon hearing what the young hero in blue did. At that, the old noble grinds his teeth with much anger for seeing his strategy fail. Then, he orders his subordinate to delay the other adventurers no matter what. Back in the cellar, the blonde decides to act even without knowing the enemy's full power. At that instant, the warrior tightly holds the hilt of her blade, ready to attack. Flashing a challenging smile, she emanates a glowing energy from her metal sword. With determination, the young woman leaps into the middle of the room, revealing her presence to the startled guard. At that, the opponent shouts, terrified upon coming face to face with the armed girl in that dark cellar. Suddenly, the wooden trapdoor explodes into the air, kicking up an enormous cloud of dust. With that, one of the criminals is thrown out of the cellar and falls rolling down the dirt trail. At that, the young warrior steps firmly on the wooden debris and calmly exits the hideout. Wielding her sword, the blonde threatens the fallen rival, telling him to speak everything he knows. but the fallen delinquent just laughs, saying in a sarcastic manner that he is not alone in the forest. At that moment, the sound of quick footsteps on the dirt indicates that more enemies are approaching. Suddenly, two guards from the gang are startled upon noticing an extremely fast approach. Appearing out of nowhere, the hero in blue passes like a flash, cutting down the opponents with his mystical energy. With that, the leader of the mercenaries shouts, warning his allies not to lower their guard by any means. But he freezes and looks sideways upon feeling the powerful presence that just appeared nearby. At that, the dust settles, and the man realizes with a start that there is no one else left standing around the cabin. Suddenly, the fearless blonde leaps from above with her glowing weapon, ready to knock out the rival. Sweating coldly, the opponent widens his eyes, unable to keep up with the speed of that attack. Then, the two blades clash with violence, generating sparks that light up the dark cellar. At that moment, the strength of the block is immense, as both force the metal of the swords. But with superior technique, the warrior breaks the enemy's weapon and ends the combat with precision. Meanwhile, outside the woods, the young hero emerges from the sky, falling straight toward the Baron. Concentrating all his power, the boy in blue emanates a gigantic mystical aura around his body. At that, the young man lands with force on the ground, while the terrible villain prepares for the counterattack. Angrily, the gray-haired Baron leaps, wielding a sword enveloped by pink energy. But the protagonist just focuses his blue vision, awaiting the right moment to counter the blow. The two spiritual forces collide, generating a strong, colorful explosion in the middle of the forest. With agility, the young man in blue retreats and lands firmly on the dirt road. Smiling from the side, the hero comments that the adversary really knows how to control spiritual energy. Annoyed, the old man wields his glowing pink weapon and curses the young warriors with hatred. But suddenly his face changes expression upon noticing something terrible on the battlefield. At that, the corrupt Baron sees that all his soldiers were easily defeated by the boy. Desperate, he grabs his own head, lamenting to see his perfect plan go wrong. Mockingly, the protagonist asks what the villain would gain by sacrificing so many innocent adventurers. Furious, the Baron shouts, telling the hero to shut his mouth, and advances again with all his strength. He tries to strike the boy, claiming he will use their bodies to rise in rank in the kingdom. But the young man in blue blocks the attack without effort, leaving his rival completely shocked. At that, the warrior in blue delivers a quick slash that shatters the opponent's blade. Without wasting time, the protagonist lands a powerful blow right on the corrupt Baron's chest. Feeling the heavy impact, the villain spits blood and staggers backward, unable to breathe. With that, he is thrown against the dirt ground, kicking up dust along the road. Holding his mouth, the injured noble asks himself in fear what just happened there. At that moment, the hero stands before him, with his blue eyes glowing intensely. With a serious face, the blue-haired boy warns that justice will finally be done. Raising his glowing sword, the youth vows to show everyone the trash that the Baron truly is. In despair, the fallen Baron begs for his life, claiming he acted under the orders of terrible demons. At that, the blonde partner is quite surprised to hear that unexpected revelation from the prisoner. But the hero in blue doubts the excuse and shouts, asking if he is just lying to survive. At that moment, a mysterious hooded figure moves silently, leaping between the nearby trees. Sweating coldly, the nobleman insists he is telling the truth and promises to guide the group to the monster's hideout. Suddenly, the masked invader appears behind them with extreme agility in a stealthy movement. The boy is startled and turns his head, quickly upon sensing that new and dangerous presence in the area. Without giving time for reactions, the stranger places a sharp knife directly against the prisoner's neck. At that, the executioner delivers a fatal blow, silencing the old Baron before he can tell any more secrets. Shocked, the young man in blue watches the fallen villain's body, unable to believe the speed of the attack. He wonders why someone would kill the hostage who held so many important answers from that place. With total coldness, the hooded warrior wipes the blood from the weapon and comments on the weakness of the deceased. Then, the man reveals himself in a friendly manner, calling the protagonist by his true name. Meanwhile, the sun's rays illuminate the grand and peaceful capital of the kingdom under the clear sky. At that, the blonde girl remembers old royal rumors about a secret division called the King's Shadows. She explains that this is a ruthless elite group specialized in classified missions and espionage. Because of this, the agents do any dirty work to ensure the absolute benefit of His Majesty. Back to the conversation, the agent officially introduces himself as Walter and confirms he is part of that group. At that, the trio gathers in a luxurious guild room, where the boy demands to know the reason for being there. Annoyed, the young man in blue asks why the warrior murdered the Baron without giving a chance for interrogation. The man apologizes calmly, explaining that the situation was delicate and required extreme measures. But the hero strikes back, saying the villain had a pact with demons and held valuable information. At that moment, the boy demands to know what the real goal of that secret organization is with them. Suddenly, an elegant man in a suit enters the office, offering to answer everything. With a polite posture, the newcomer introduces himself as Ingram, the respected master of that local guild. At that, the protagonist stares at him suspiciously, wondering about the level of involvement of this new individual. The administrator apologizes for what happened and thanks the young people for saving the lives of the adventurers. With that, he settles down calmly in his armchair, appearing quite serious about the matter. But the boss warns that he cannot reveal all the secrets yet, as it is a matter of state. The boy gets annoyed with the mystery, and the partner agrees, complaining about the uselessness of being there. At that, the elegant master flashes a slight, enigmatic smile before making a job offer. He explains that he will agree to share everything he knows if the heroes accept a special mission. Intrigued, the young man in blue narrows his eyes and asks about the nature of this important request. The administrator keeps it a mystery but confesses that the matter is of extreme urgency and danger to the kingdom. With a focused look, the man reveals that the entire mission involves a terrible fight against demons. He specifies that the main target is the feared army of the Demon King, which is on the move. Upon hearing that, the hero clenches his teeth, confirming that his worst enemies are involved. In his mind, the boy celebrates, understanding that he will finally have the perfect chance to avenge his parents. At that, he remembers with deep pain that tragic day that changed his entire life forever. Observing the reaction, Agent Walter accompanies the tense silence that takes over that noble office. With a firm posture, the protagonist accepts the job immediately, leaving the guild master relieved. The informant stands up quickly, inviting the boy in blue to step aside to settle the details. At that, the young blonde girl stands up, excited at the prospect of facing the dark army head-on. But the boss interrupts her coldly, warning that the girl is not allowed to go with her partner. She becomes outraged, demanding explanations, but the man asks her to understand the political position of the kingdom. He explains that he cannot risk the life of the heiress of such an important lineage in this battle. Frustrated, the girl shouts her friend's name as she sees him walking toward the exit door. With a worried tone, she accepts the decision but begs him not to go overboard in the fight. Smiling with confidence, the young man waves back and tells his friend not to worry about his well-being. At that, the young noblewoman only watches her partner's departure with a tense look full of worry. At that moment, the beautiful sunset illuminates the silent tombstones of an isolated cemetery. With affection, a beautiful bouquet of white flowers is left on the cold stone of a grave. Walking through the location, the hero talks with the hooded agent about the increase in attacks in the region. At that, the informant explains that the defeated bandits were actually acting under mysterious orders. Surprised, the boy in blue widens his eyes upon learning that the demons have already invaded the surroundings. The man explains that the criminals were just puppets used to distract the kingdom's guards. Then, the young man questions why they do not send the royal army instead of an adventurer. But the spy reveals that they need someone strong who can move in absolute secrecy. At that, he explains that the protagonist's mission will be to track the targets and capture them alive. Next, the agent extends his hand and delivers a paper with the coordinates of the meeting point. He warns that the companions chosen to help him are already waiting at the indicated location. At that, the hooded man states that fighting unknown monsters alone would be suicide. Looking at the note, the hero hears that the allies were handpicked by the guild master. A short time later, the evening covers the houses of the peaceful mountain town with a dark tone. Finally, the young man in blue arrives in front of a large wooden inn in the urban center. Adjusting the hood of his cloak, the boy prepares himself, knowing he needs to maintain total focus from then on. At that instant, the heavy door of the tavern is opened, revealing the noisy interior of the establishment. Walking slowly, the young man enters the hall crowded with customers talking and drinking happily. Thoughtfully, the hero looks around, trying to identify the warriors who will be part of his team. Suddenly, the young man widens his eyes upon spotting something extremely bizarre at the back of the establishment. He finds a table decorated with a noisy banner that has his own name written on it. Completely shocked, the young man in blue makes a face, unable to understand that foolish reception. At that, a muscular woman with red hair drinks a huge mug of beer without stopping. Noticing the guest's arrival, the redhead shouts happily, calling the young man to join the table. Annoyed, the protagonist gnashes his teeth, cursing the guild master for that choice. Sitting with his arms crossed, the hero stares at the group, trying to maintain a professional posture. With suspicion, the young man asks if they are indeed the warriors selected for that mission. But the redhead just laughs and confirms that the guy with glasses was the one who hired them for the job. The boy in blue complains about the mess, warning that drawing so much attention could alert the demons. Giving a laugh, the woman waves back, apologizing without seeming to care much. Observing that careless attitude, the hero thinks angrily that this expedition is not a joke. Smiling, the redhead introduces herself as Ekaterina, revealing she is a strong warrior from distant lands. At that, a timid young girl in a purple hood introduces herself, stammering, and reveals she is a mage of the group. Noting that the girl is trembling from pure nervousness, the protagonist wonders if she has ever been in combat. Next, the boy in blue focuses gaze on the third member, who is drawing intently on a paper. But the bearded fellow completely ignores the hero's presence, leaving the young man quite frustrated. Laughing out loud, the redhead explains that the grumpy dwarf is named Jin and loves to spend his time painting. Feeling a massive headache, the young man in blue bites his lips, thinking that this mission will go wrong. While the others happily order more drinks, the boy sighs, really wanting to go back home. At that, the hero rips the wanted poster, stating that he does not need introductions because of the paper. Excited, the warrior confesses she was eager to fight alongside the famous Mad Dog. Smiling, she comments that everyone in the capital knows him for acting like a wild animal in combat. The boy makes a grimace of discouragement, thinking that he would have liked to receive a more elegant nickname. Suddenly, the hero turns his head upon hearing a big commotion starting at the tavern counter. He spots a drunk and arrogant customer shouting aggressively at the owner of the establishment. With a calm posture, the tavern keeper demands only that the individual pay the bill for everything he consumed. But the intoxicated man points his finger and shouts, saying the merchant will regret the charge. With that, the troublemaker raises his closed fist, threatening to turn everyone inside into his servants. Observing everything from afar, the hero narrows his eyes suspiciously upon noticing something strange about that individual. Suddenly, a friend holds the troublemaker back, paying the bill and apologizing for his behavior. At that, the troublemaker's companions lead him away, while thanking the tavern keeper for the meal. Observing the scene, the strong redhead gestures, commenting that those individuals seem extremely suspicious. At that moment, the young mage in the purple hood remembers hearing rumors about humans allied with demons. Excited, the warrior claps her hands and suggests beating them up to force answers out of them. But the hero in blue rejects the idea, explaining that they should only follow them in silence so as not to alert them. With that, the redhead hugs the boy in blue roughly, praising her partner's good sense. A short time later, the group of suspicious men keeps walking along a dark trail in the forest. Hidden in the bushes, the adventurers observe the targets marching with a lit lantern. At that, the timid mage asks if they should follow them, but the hero warns that entering the woods blindly is risky. Instead, the boy in blue extends his hand and summons a bright spiritual butterfly to track them. The young girl in the purple hood is completely amazed to see the creature glowing before her eyes. Holding the small spirit, the hero in blue concentrates to guide the tracking spell. At that, the luminous insect flies toward the targets, leaving a bright trail in the middle of the dark woods. With that, the young warrior warns that the group will keep their distance while following the spirit's light. Impressed, the mage asks how he did that, and the young man reveals he learned it from his elf master. But he asks for focus and warns that they need to continue the pursuit before losing the trail. While they march, the luminous trail guides the adventurers to an old, abandoned stone ruin. Crouching behind the leaves, the hero whispers, indicating that the suspicious group has reached the destination. At that, they spot the entrance to a dark cave that appears to be an abandoned dungeon in the forest. At that moment, a mysterious individual with pale skin and white hair appears, awaiting the arrival of the men. The young hero widens his eyes upon noting the sinister aura that emanates from that strange individual. Suddenly, the young man in blue notices the presence of black horns on the newcomer's forehead. With that, the boy becomes completely paralyzed upon understanding that the opponent is indeed a demon. With an imposing posture, the white-haired monster scolds the humans for the unjustifiable delay. Sweating coldly, the protagonist in blue watches the scene, confirming that his mission is on the right track. The demon complains that he allowed them to go rest in the village, but even so, they did not keep their promise. Desperate, the men bow, begging for forgiveness from the fearful commander with horns. But one of the subordinates tries to gesture arrogantly, claiming that the delay was insignificant. At that, the rebel complains, demanding better treatment for being useful to his presence there. With a cold and calm look, the demon just listens to that insolence without changing his expression. Suddenly, the creature advances and grabs the arrogant man's face with great violence. Without any mercy, the horned monster crushes the rebel's neck in front of the other allies. Shocked, the remaining mercenaries go into despair upon witnessing that brutal scene. Hidden in the woods, the heroes become tense with the ruthless cruelty demonstrated by the opponent. With disdain, the white-haired creature throws the body aside, calling the deceased a fool. Next, the leader orders them to clean up that mess, ensuring that the war will end with their victory. At that, he promises a great reward at the end but commands everyone to return immediately to their posts. Terrified, the soldiers shout, accepting the commander's order without daring to complain about anything else. Whispering, the muscular redhead comments that this enemy is a true, dangerous psychopath. She turns around and asks if the protagonist in blue is okay upon noticing his absolute silence. At that, the boy flashes a frightening smile and whispers that he never forgot what happened in the past. Clutching his chest, the hero remembers the scars and everything the demon stole from his life. With an insane look full of hatred, the young warrior celebrates, finally finding his enemy again. Meanwhile, the henchmen carry the deceased inside the dungeon, following the horned commander. Observing everything from afar, the adventurers watch the retreat of the enemy troops into the cave. Excited, the muscular redhead readies her weapon and suggests invading the place once and for all. But the hero quickly holds her back, preventing her from advancing foolishly without a good strategy. Sensing a slight fluctuation, the dangerous horned demon stops at the entrance and looks back toward the forest. At that, the white-haired commander narrows his eyes suspiciously at that noise in the bushes. To avoid being discovered, the young man in blue pulls the redhead to the ground and covers her mouth in absolute silence. At that, heavy steps echo very close by while the young man in blue trembles with dread in the woods. With his heart racing, the boy focuses his gaze on the boot that approaches closer and closer to them. Suddenly, the demon delivers a wind strike, cutting the branches to check the surroundings. At that moment, the terrible Horned Commander raises his hand, sensing a strange energy in the woods, but the pale-skinned enemy lowers his arm, concluding that everything was nothing more than his imagination. Under the beautiful glow of the full moon, silence finally returns to the top of the tall trees. At that, the group of adventurers collapses onto the dirt, letting out a long sigh of pure relief. But the muscular redhead just laughs at the situation, leaving the protagonist very angry. Annoyed, the boy in blue shouts at her, warning that they were almost discovered by the opponent. Mockingly, the woman asks for calm, saying that their only duty there is to annihilate the monsters. The young man fires back furiously that advancing without a plan or information about the rival's strength is foolish. At that, the hero shouts that this is not a game and tells the redhead to go back home if she wants to play. Next, the young man focuses on the other two, warning that whoever is not focused should give up now. Thoughtfully, the protagonist in blue looks away, murmuring that he does not have the slightest option to fail. With a furious countenance, the boy swears to drag the entire army of the Demon King into the light. At that, the young man decides to advance alone, telling the allies to let the master know that he will handle it. Shocked, the three companions watch the hero's departure, not knowing what to do from there. Later, the young man positions himself at the top of a stone cliff under the glow of the full moon. Crouching behind the leaves, the hero studies the best invasion route to enter the place. He notes that there is only one sentinel guarding the dungeon entrance at that time of night. But suddenly, a shadow appears behind him, warning that they need to study the map first. Startled, the boy in blue turns his head upon feeling a light touch on his left shoulder. At that, the dwarf with the dark beard offers a rolled parchment, leaving the young man confused. Opening the paper with curiosity, the protagonist in blue is surprised by the content there. He realizes he holds a detailed blueprint, showing all the rooms of that dungeon. At that instant, the timid mage in the purple hood appears, explaining that the old man drew everything by himself. She tells that right after accepting the mission, the painter studied all the historical records of the area. The hero remembers seeing the grumpy dwarf doodling and recognizes the great talent of his race. Smiling with friendliness, the boy thanks the old man, giving a thumbs-up sign. At that, the redhead approaches with her hands on her waist and calls the protagonist by his nickname. With an awkward countenance, she offers a sincere apology for acting in such a relaxed way before. But the hero responds calmly, saying that it is fine since they were not captured. The warrior states that she will not question the reason for his obsession with fighting demons. At that, the duo agrees that everyone there accepted the job for having their own reasons. With a friendly smile, the redhead extends her hand, inviting the young warrior to fight alongside them. With his back turned, the hero feels pathetic for letting his emotions explode in that foolish way. Clenching his fist, the young man realizes he was proud to pretend he could do everything by himself. With that, he focuses his blue gaze, determined to trust his new combat allies. Smiling, the young man accepts the handshake, asking them to protect his back in battle. Next, the protagonist in blue states that he will do everything to make up for his previous mistake. At that, the boy proposes using each one's strength to draw up an attack strategy together. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the stone cave, the solitary guard watches the passage in silence. Yawning a lot, the sentinel complains about being very sleepy from spending the night awake at that post. But suddenly, he opens his eyes, startled upon hearing heavy steps coming in his direction. At that, the man spots a silhouette approaching and demands to know the identity of the invader. Emerging from the shadows, the redhead carries her huge stone hammer on her shoulder with a sadistic smile. From the map, the group remembers that the dungeon is built with several rooms around a large hall. Analyzing the blueprint, the young man in blue indicates that the back room is the ideal location for the ambush. With that, the young man proposes that while one serves as bait, the rest enter in silence to attack. But the muscular redhead winks and offers herself as bait, leaving the protagonist speechless. Smiling with sharp fangs, the redhead states that this task of drawing attention is perfect for her. With her immense stone hammer on her shoulders, she confesses that acting from the shadows is not her style. At that, the dungeon guard goes into total panic upon coming face to face with that imposing invader. The warrior prepares herself, telling the hostage to warn his allies that she wants to face them all. Leaping high, she delivers a crushing blow with her heavy weapon against the opponent's guard. At that moment, the strong impact of the hammer destroys the ground, raising a dense curtain of dirt. With that, the entire stone structure of the entrance begins to shake with the violence of that attack. At that, the redhead rests her giant weapon on the ground, observing the completely defeated sentinel. Flashing a playful laugh, she admits in a teasing way that she went a little overboard with the strength. Then, the warrior tells her partner in blue to hurry before the enemy group appears. Thanking his friend's support, the hero draws his blade, determined to put the plan into motion. At that, the three adventurers run inside the cave, taking advantage of the distraction at the entrance. Inside the underground palace, a sinister and purple energy begins to float between the columns. With his back turned, the terrible white-haired demon stops suddenly upon sensing the invasion of the place. A servant comes running in despair to report that there is someone destroying the forces at the entrance. Without any hesitation, the monster executes a swift pink slash that eliminates the messenger himself. With a cold look, the cruel commander states that he could already sense the invading presence from afar. At that, he lays the subordinate down in the pool of blood, complaining about the traitors incapable of acting in secret. Another hooded monster appears, trembling, and suggests that they should retreat before royal reinforcements arrive. But the leader refuses the retreat, claiming that they must go ahead with the plan because victory is very close. Then, he orders the servant to focus only on his work, leaving everything else under his custody. With a lot of anger, the Horned Commander runs toward the entrance, emanating a magical energy. Meanwhile, several lesser demons run armed through the corridors to contain the invader. Hidden behind a pillar, the blue-haired hero watches the group of monsters pass by quickly. He smiles upon noting that all the attention of the patrols is focused solely on the entrance gate. At that, the boy whispers, telling the other allies to advance through the secondary paths in silence. But upon turning around, the protagonist is surprised to notice something unusual with his mage partner. He realizes that the young girl in the purple hood is down on her knees, trembling from pure dread of the combat. Worried, the young man calls for the ally, who answers startled, trying to hide her weakness. The girl apologizes, stammering, and confesses to being scared to death of that terrible mission. She lowers her head, crying for feeling pathetic for freezing and trembling before the imminent danger. In silence, the hero in blue just observes the sincere outburst of his dear new companion. But with sweetness, he shakes his head, leaving the small purple-eyed mage quite confused. The young man confesses that his own heart also almost leaps out of his chest when thinking about fighting demons. He explains that the difference is not letting fear dominate all your decisions at the time of the fight. The boy advises his friend to focus on the real reasons she came, so they can overcome the dread together. Regaining her strength, the mage grips her wooden staff and swears she will give her best. With that, the group return to running through the dungeon corridors toward the main hall. Meanwhile, at the entrance, the sound of clashing metal echoes loudly around the woods. The redhead enjoys herself in combat, provoking the enemies with a lot of confidence in her skills. With a quick spin, she strikes an adversary who flies far through the air after suffering the strong impact. At that, the delinquents fall defeated to the ground, while the invader keeps advancing without stopping. Annoyed, one of the surviving opponents shouts with hatred, refusing to be outperformed by the intruder. But with her eyes glowing in flames, the warrior leaps, raising her immense battle hammer. She hits the ground, generating a large explosion of dust that knocks out the remaining rivals. At that, the redhead rests her iron weapon surrounded by fallen and unconscious opponents on the ground. Wiping her face, she mocks, saying that weak patrol barely served as a warm-up for her. But suddenly, A gigantic shadow with purple eyes appears right behind the defenseless warrior. Sensing a terrible killing intent, she freezes and looks back in absolute panic. The ruthless horned commander falls, delivering a deadly pink blow against the redhead's hammer. With a mocking smile, the red-haired warrior celebrates, seeing that her terrible opponent decided to show up. At that, the pale-skinned villain positions himself imposingly, emanating a terrible aura of danger through the place. In silence, the creature just observes the adversary with a focused look full of mystery. But the horned monster is suspicious, because he sees only one warrior fighting at the entrance of that cave. With that, the evil leader gives a sarcastic smile upon realizing that she is just an intelligent bait. He recognizes that the strategy of using a distraction was a good move by the group of invaders. With no time to lose, the demon raises his hand, concentrating a strong magical energy to attack immediately. Even sweating coldly, the muscular redhead maintains her confident posture and challenges him to try to defeat her. Meanwhile, quick steps echo through the dark corridors of the old stone dungeon. At that, the young man in blue leads the run with his companions, warning that they are close to the target's room. As they turn the corridor, the heroes spot the huge purple glow emanating from the main hall of the ruin. At that moment, the group stops their steps, becoming quite frightened by what they see before them. Before their eyes, a gigantic magical rift floats in the middle of the hall, releasing a lot of energy. The protagonist in blue shouts furiously, while the timid mage gets startled, not understanding that structure. With that, the hero realizes that the enemy army is opening a mass teleportation portal. He wonders with anger why they would build such a dangerous gate right in that isolated location, but the young man in blue knows he cannot waste time trying to guess the opponent's plans. Leaping with determination, he raises his sword, decided to destroy the portal before it is too late. At that, the masked sorcerer notices the invasion and gnashes his teeth, annoyed by the boy's audacity. Then, the opponent extends his arm, conjuring a red shield to prevent the hero's advance. Suddenly, the warrior in blue is hit by the magical barrier that glows intensely on the ground. Feeling the strong impact, the young man makes a face of pain, unable to break the enemy defense. At that instant, a strong explosion of red flames envelops the young man, leaving him cornered. With that, the impact throws him back, while the magical energy burns the surroundings with violence. The hero in blue clenches his teeth furiously upon realizing the absurd strength of the rival's protective spell. At that, the terrible heat of the flames spreads, blocking any chance of direct approach. Victorious, the hooded sorcerer gives a hysterical laugh, celebrating having caught the intruder, but the protagonist envelopes himself in a blue light barrier that completely extinguishes the enemy fire. Shocked, the opponent retreats upon noting that the warrior in blue managed to conjure a defense in seconds. At that moment, the timid allied mage raises her staff and casts a support spell to help her friend. Propelled by the wind magic, the young warrior leaps again, delivering a swift blow. Desperate, the rival sorcerer uses all his remaining energy to raise a new hexagonal shield. The sharp edge of the sword collides with the purple barrier, generating magical sparks that glow intensely. Forcing his weapon, the young man in blue notices that the opponent is extremely skilled in defensive magias. With a focused look, the young man focuses all his power on the blade, determined to break the rival's shield. Suddenly, a second enemy sorcerer positions himself, charging a large, burning fireball. Without mercy, the villain launches the flames directly against the hero, who is completely defenseless in the air. Suddenly, the stone floor cracks and the strong dwarf Jin leaps from the dirt, delivering a surprise blow. The hooded sorcerer goes into absolute panic upon seeing that he was completely caught by surprise. Wielding his heavy pickaxe, the old warrior attacks the distracted opponent with extreme violence. With a devastating blow, the old man knocks out the adversary, who falls defeated and screaming from pure pain. At that, the first mage notices that his hexagonal defense is beginning to break under the pressure. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist focuses his gaze, determined to end the combat at that instant. Concentrating all his mana, the young warrior channels a powerful flow of blue light into his weapon. Under the incredible force of the attack, the sorcerer's hexagonal barrier shatters like common glass. With a quick movement, the hero in blue delivers a well-aimed blow that neutralizes the dangerous rival. The opponent screams in pain upon suffering the devastating impact, falling completely defeated to the floor. Without giving time for rest, the young man immobilizes the fallen enemy, keeping him pinned against the cold ground. Holding the mage by the collar, the hero in blue demands to know the real reason they are opening that portal. Even defeated, the villain gives a mocking smile and responds that he would never tell anything to a human. At that, the young man in blue gnashes his teeth out of pure anger, staring at the defeated villain with a lot of hatred. Worried, the mage in the purple hood warns that they would have serious trouble if they had delayed any longer. At that moment, the heroes observe startled that immense purple portal that was almost complete. With that, the hero draws his blade, determined to break everything, but the ally shouts desperately to stop him. Then, the mage explains that destroying that magical rift would be extremely dangerous for all of them. At that, she reveals that that gate consumes a lot of energy to connect two distant dimensions. If the flow of magic collapses all at once, the entire region will be devastated by a terrible explosion. Hearing that revelation, the warrior bites his lips with a lot of anger at that complicated situation. Furious, the young man holds the prisoner by the collar and demands to know how to deactivate the portal immediately. Even hurt, the enemy henchman just gives a mocking laugh upon hearing the boy's question. Unexpectedly, the monster spits blood directly into the hero's face, demonstrating total contempt. Mockingly, the prisoner repeats that he would never reveal important secrets to pathetic humans. The fallen villain states that the victory of his people is inevitable and tells the humans to just accept it. At that, the young man in blue wipes his face with his hand while his hatred increases in an uncontrolled way. Laughing out loud, the adversary mocks, saying that the young man can do absolutely nothing against him. Without any mercy, the hero delivers a devastating attack against the prisoner, silencing the mockery. With a frightening look, the warrior demands that the creature tell the secret once and for all. Dominated by hatred, the young man strikes the opponent repeatedly without giving any chance of defense. Terrified, the young mage trembles upon seeing the blind fury that took over her new teammate. Beside them, the other tied monster and the dwarf observe the scene, shocked by the boy's aggressiveness. At that, the warrior shouts uncontrollably with bloodied fists and a disturbing look. He remembers the tragic day when the flames destroyed his village and took everything he had. Clenching his teeth, the young man demands an immediate answer while the painful memories suffocate him. But the dwarf holds the hero's arm firmly, trying to stop him before he does something crazy. With a serious countenance, the experienced ally stares at the boy, asking him to regain his reason. Surprised by the intervention, the young man in blue widens his eyes and begins to calm down slowly. He takes a step back, looking at the fallen enemy, unable to believe what he just did. At that, the young man just bites his lip, frustrated for letting his past emotions dominate the combat. In a timid tone, the mage in the purple hood comments that that was not the best way to interrogate. Suddenly, heavy steps echo through the large stone corridor, drawing the immediate attention of the group. At that moment, they spot the strong red-haired warrior fallen on the ground, totally unconscious. The small mage widens her eyes and freezes with dread upon realizing that her strong ally was defeated. A mysterious hand holds the fighter's red hair, raising her body like a trophy. The hero in blue stares at the entrance of the hall, going on maximum alert with the arrival of the threat. Sweating coldly, he realizes that the true commander of that army of monsters is before them. Before the invasion, the muscular redhead had asked if the partner could act alone. At that moment, the hero had asked only for her to draw the attention of the guards at the entrance. Smiling with confidence, the warrior had promised to finish quickly to meet them inside. But now the fearful horned demon leader appears triumphant, dragging the defeated ally. With disdain, the terrible commander comments that the red-haired invader was no match for his power. At that, the hero draws his blade with extreme speed, preparing himself for the deadly combat. Leaping with fury, the young warrior advances through the air, delivering an attack against the rival leader. With his eyes glowing in hatred, the boy shouts, demanding to know what the villain did to his friend. Without caring, the monster throws the warrior's body to the side to defend himself from the imminent blow. At that instant, the young man is startled upon realizing the absurd reaction speed of the rival commander. With agility, the hero catches the red-haired ally in the air, saving her body before she hits the ground. Landing firmly, he holds her in his arms, trying to protect her with his own body. Desperate, the boy calls his friend's name, begging her to resist the injuries. Suddenly, the hero's instinct flashes, warning about a surprise attack coming at high speed. At that, the dangerous horned demon reappears, delivering a deadly punch against the defenseless young man. At that, the leader's terrible punch hits the warrior in blue squarely in the face with extreme violence. With that, the force of the impact throws the hero back, colliding violently against the stone wall. At that moment, the pale-skinned villain widens his eyes, startled upon feeling a new presence in the area. Even hurt, the young man in blue stands firm on his feet, protecting the unconscious ally in his arms. With a bloodied face, the warrior stares at him with a serious and completely fearless look. At that, the monster commander smiles from the corner of his mouth, praising the surprising resistance of the young rival. He wonders how the opponent still manages to stand after suffering such a violent attack. The horned creature focuses his gaze on his own hand, feeling a very strange energy in the air. Then, the leader clenches his fists in silence, trying to understand what is happening to the young man. Suddenly, a heavy pickaxe is thrown, flying at high speed in the villain's direction. At that, the horned enemy dodges the dangerous metallic object quickly in a swift reflex. The tool hits the stone wall and shatters, raising dust all over the old ruin. Astonished, the pale-skinned commander wonders who would have thrown such an uncommon weapon. Next, a powerful blast of golden light glows, illuminating the entire underground hall. The strong magical spell hits the commander's chest, and he is pushed back with violence. At that, the monster gnashes his teeth furiously upon realizing that his chest was hit by the energy. Standing, the timid mage in the purple hood positions herself, conjuring her glowing circles of sorcery. With determination, the young ally shouts furiously, releasing all her stored mana against the rival. But the experienced horned commander leaps to the side, dodging the magic with ease. At that, the monster clicks his tongue, annoyed at having his advance interrupted by her sorcery. With fantastic agility, he runs, evading all the bright energy beams on the floor. The evil leader decides to advance directly against the sorceress to eliminate her once and for all. But the hooded girl gives a slight smile, leaving the opponent confused by that calm reaction. Suddenly, an immense stone hand cracks the ground, appearing right under the creature's feet. At that, the surprising rocky arm grabs the enemy's foot, pinning it firmly to the floor. The strong dwarf Gin emerges from under the dirt, holding the horned commander's leg with force. Trapped by the trap, the white-haired leader tries to free himself desperately from that grip. The horned monster notices the imminent danger upon, noting that he became totally exposed to the counter-attack. Taking advantage of the perfect opening, the mage focuses her staff, charging her most destructive spell. Shouting with all her strength, she fires an immense blast of golden energy against the trapped target. The devastating beam of light envelops the commander, generating a golden explosion in the middle of the hall. With that, the power of the impact launches the opponent far, throwing stone debris through the air. But the dangerous monster lands, sliding on the ground, demonstrating his impressive durability. At that moment, he raises his head, startled upon realizing that another warrior is already very close. The young man in blue appears in the air, delivering a swift blow with his sword against the opponent's arm. With a purple energy shield, the leader manages to block the sharp blade of the young warrior. The hero gives a confident smile, confirming that he already expected that defensive reaction from the rival. The duo begins a frenetic combat, exchanging swift blows that generate bright sparks through the air. Forcing his sword with all determination, the young man tries to break the creature's magical barrier. At that, the dangerous commander delivers a swift punch coated in purple magic directly at the hero. But the young man in blue dodges with agility, leaving the monster completely shocked by the speed. The leader realizes that the young mage in the purple HUD used support sorcery to accelerate her partner. With visible tiredness, the allied girl remains standing, focused on ensuring the combat support. The hero in blue advances, shouting for the opponent to keep his attention focused on his sharp blade. With a precise diagonal movement, the boy hits the commander's chest with a well-aimed blow. At that, the horned monster spits blood upon feeling the blade cut deeply into his defense. Taking advantage of the benefit, the young man spins his body, preparing a second attack to end the fight. With that, he delivers a powerful thrust to the adversary's chest, neutralizing him at that instant. But the young man in blue widens his eyes, startled upon feeling an unexpected danger coming from behind. To the hero's despair, the terrible opponent holds the sharp blade with his hands, stopping the attack. At that, the dangerous demon commander gives a sarcastic laugh, admitting the surprising strength of the group. With that, the horned creature blocks the sharp sword all at once, promising to fight with all his power. At that moment, the villain's muscular arm expands, enveloped in a frightening purple energy. He releases an immense amount of evil mana, covering the entire underground room in pure darkness. The hero in blue retreats a few steps, sweating coldly upon feeling that crushing killing intent. With a maniacal look, the enemy commander swears he will annihilate all the adventurers from there. Everything begins in an old training session in the forest, where a straw dummy is hit by wind blows. At that, the young man in blue trains his sword movements hard under the glow of the sun. Suddenly, his elf master calls him with a quite worried tone, interrupting his exercise. The boy explains calmly that he is just training, but the blonde says that is not exactly the problem. The tutor warns with seriousness that he was using raw energy without first transforming it into an aura. At that, she explains that raw mana is like molten metal, extremely hot and unstable. The beautiful elf tells that aura is like forging this liquid metal into solid steel to protect the weapon. With that, sorcerers shape this raw substance into different elements to give form to magic. But she alerts that enveloping the body with unstable energy should injure him severely immediately. At that, the blonde is shocked to hear from the young man and that he has already been doing this dangerous training for years. Smiling, the protagonist comments that he thinks the sensation of having boiling metal in his muscles is incredible. The boy in blue stares at her confused, not understanding the reason his mentor became so paralyzed. Thoughtfully, the elf wonders how a common human body could endure this level of power. Intrigued, the young man asks if there are other races capable of performing this same legendary feat. In silence, the blonde looks away, appearing to guard a quite old and dangerous secret. With affection, she just gives a little pat on the student's head, saying they will talk about it later. The young warrior grumbles, upset for being left with so many doubts in his mind. But the elf warns seriously that if he maintains his goal of revenge, things will get difficult. Back to the present, the terrible horned demon advances, releasing massive waves of fury. The hero in blue grips the handle of his sword, knowing that that'll be the most difficult battle of all. At that, the dangerous leader advances, delivering a devastating punch enveloped in a dark mist. With quick reflexes, the young warrior dodges the crushing attack that almost destroys his weapon. At that instant, he widens his eyes upon realizing that the opponent's speed increased a lot. Suddenly, the enemy leader delivers a violent punch against the young man without giving time for defense. With a powerful kick, the horned creature throws the warrior against the floor with extreme force. The young man's body collides against a stone pillar that begins to crack with the force of the impact. Shouting from pure pain, the hero falls to the ground, quite hurt after suffering that brutal sequence. At that, he spits blood while the hunted maid shouts, desperately upon seeing her partner on the ground. Terrified by her friend's fall, the girl goes into total panic, not knowing how to react to the danger. Slowly, The terrible demon commander turns his murderous gaze in the direction of the defenseless ally. At that, he concentrates his purple energy in his claws, preparing himself to deliver a fatal blow. With extreme speed, the horned villain leaps through the air toward the mage to eliminate her quickly. Desperate, the young woman raises her wooden staff and creates a hexagonal shield of pure golden energy. But the monster's devastating punch hits the hexagonal barrier, which begins to shatter entirely. With that, the impact breaks the defense and throws the mage back, making her collide against the ruins. Without giving time for rest, the white-haired creature runs to finalize the service for good. The villain leaps again, raising his claws to strike the girl who is fallen and defenseless on the ground. At that moment, an immense curtain of dust and stones rises, covering the entire location of the collision. But the demon commander widens his eyes, startled upon realizing that his attack was blocked. The strong dwarf Gin appears suddenly, using his pickaxe to hold the rival's deadly blow. Forced to retreat, the evil leader slides along the stone floor, growling with anger at the interruption. He narrows his eyes, quite annoyed to see that the humans still manage to resist his power. In silence, the horned monster focuses his gaze on the dust cloud, trying to track his targets. At that, two firm leads appear in the middle of the debris, emanating a strange green magical energy. At that, the brave dwarfkin leaps from above, raising his pickaxe to deliver a new blow against the leader. At that moment, the small ally gets startled upon realizing that the opponent is much faster than he thought. Flashing a sadistic smile, the horned creature accompanies the opponent's movement with total disdain. With extreme agility, the villain dodges with ease, preparing a merciless counter-attack against him. Then, the monster delivers an overwhelming kick that throws the robust warrior far away with extreme violence. The strong impact against the wall generates a large explosion of dust, knocking out the ally on the ground. With that, the entire group of adventurers ends up fallen and defeated on the ground before the imposing commander. Sweating coldly, the hero tries to get up, not understanding how that monster's strength rose to another level. At that, the leader points his glowing hand, ordering the hooded sorcerer to finish his work. The subordinate trembles with dread, but accepts the order immediately, preparing himself to reactivate the portal. Quickly, the enemy servant begins to conjure his spells, making the dimensional rift glow strongly. Observing the scene, the young man in blue tries to decipher what the true secret is behind the rival power. He asks himself desperately how he could defeat such an absurd opponent in that situation. At that, the fearful commander returns to concentrating his purple aura, preparing himself to end the combat. With an imposing posture, the horned monster closes his fist, determined to eliminate the hero once and for all. At that instant, a crucial memory flashes in the boy's mind, bringing an important revelation. He remembers his master's old teaching about covering the body directly with raw energy. Flashing a challenging smile, the warrior decides to risk everything on that forbidden and dangerous technique. With that, the young man takes momentum on the ground, advancing with unbelievable speed in the rival's direction. Astonished, the horned monster widens his eyes upon noting the absurd speed the boy reached. Shouting with all his strength, the hero advances through the air, delivering a quick attack against the opponent. But the villain just mocks his audacity and prepares his fists to crush the opponent once and for all. Suddenly, the hero throws a handful of sand directly into the demon leader's eyes in a clever trick. The sand hits the commander squarely in the face, leaving him temporarily blind in the middle of the fight. Completely confused, the monster tries to wipe his eyes, unable to understand what just happened. At that, the young man in blue appears silently right behind him, preparing his blade to strike. Leaping over the opponent's back, the boy secures a perfect position to deliver his attack. With total precision, the young man strikes the creature's shoulder, discharging all his accumulated energy. The commander screams from pure pain upon feeling the terrible impact of the hero's surprise attack. At that moment, the warrior whispers in the rival's ear, revealing that he discovered his combat secret. He explains that the opponent's body is inflated with mana, and that this power has a dangerous limit. Sweating coldly, the horned creature begins to tremble upon realizing that his weakness was discovered. With an insane smile, the hero swears to inject even more raw energy into the adversary's body. Desperate, the monster screams in agony when an immense flow of mana begins to collapse his muscles. The creature tries to free himself, but the intense pain prevents him from making any defensive movement. The boy in blue increases the pressure, stating that he will continue until the rival's body explodes for good. With a lot of anger, the enemy commander swears he will take the boy along with him if he happens to fall. At that, the monster's arm begins to glow intensely, concentrating all the remaining mana to attack. But the hero uses the very energy released by the villain to deliver an overwhelming counter-attack. The devastating energy cuts the air with violence, completely neutralizing the opponent. Suddenly, the strong red-haired warrior reappears, delivering a surprise kick directly to the rival's head. Totally weakened, the monster wonders how those humans still manage to keep fighting. Shouting with determination, the red-haired fighter tells her partner in blue to finalize the combat once and for all. The young hero raises his glowing blade with all his strength, focused on ending the confrontation soon. With a well-aimed and devastating blow, he hits the enemy commander's chest, who collapses defeated. The demon leader's massive body falls without strength, destroying the rustic floor of that old dungeon. Finally, the warrior duo manages to outperform the terrible adversary, who now lies vanquished on the floor. The horned creature lets out his last scream of despair while his dark energy dissipates. The hooded sorcerer goes into panic upon seeing that his supreme leader was completely defeated there. With that, the hero orders that the gate be destroyed before new monsters manage to cross. At that, the hooded sorcerer widens his eyes, terrified upon seeing a bright magical attack approaching. Desperate, the subordinate extends his arm, conjuring a purple energy in an attempt to defend himself. With agility, the young mage takes momentum on the ground, preparing herself to deliver her own spell. The small ally leaps through the air by surprise, appearing right behind the opponent with her wooden staff. Shouting with determination, the girl swears she will not allow them to conclude that evil plan. At that, she delivers a well-aimed golden energy blow directly to the unprotected enemy's back. The strong impact of the spell knocks out the adversary, throwing his body without strength against the floor. Wiping the sweat from her face, the girl becomes quite worried upon noting a mysterious light glowing. Even defeated, the villain gives a mocking laugh, warning that their reaction was too late. Suddenly, the glowing circle in his hand shoots purple lightning, activating the immense portal for good. The dimensional rift begins to spin quickly, releasing colossal waves of mana through the hall. At that moment, a blinding light fills the place, forcing the warriors to cover their faces. With his face bloodied, the young man in blue shouts desperately upon realizing that the gate was reactivated. Suddenly, a frightening laugh echoes, revealing that the defeated demon leader is still alive. The creature's muscular arm begins to emanate a bright pink energy in an uncontrolled way. Even quite injured, the fearful commander reappears, letting out a deafening scream of pure agony. The hero in blue is shocked to note that the opponent is forcing his power beyond all limits. At that, an immense energy explosion throws the boy and his red-haired partner far away with violence. Sliding along the ground, the young man realizes that the attack actually was nothing more than a distraction to escape. The warrior in blue gnashes his teeth furiously for allowing the adversary to use that trick. He realizes that the creature used all his remaining mana just to manage to clear a path. Observing from above, they spot the demon commander running quickly into the active portal. Gripping the handle of his sword firmly, the hero swears he will not let the villain escape from there alive. Mocking the humans, the monster shouts that his army's victory is guaranteed with the gate open. Suddenly, the creature widens its eyes, startled upon feeling a new threat approaching fast. Covering his body with an intense blue aura, the blue-haired hero awakens an overwhelming power. With his eyes glowing in pure hatred, the young man shouts that he will never let the opponent escape from there alive. At that, the boy takes momentum on the ground, cracking the stones with the force of his incredible dash. With divine agility, the young warrior advances through the air, becoming an unstoppable beam of blue light. Terrified, the Horned Commander accompanies, that blue energy coming directly in his direction. The young man appears right behind the opponent, grabbing his hair before he crosses the magical rift. With a quick movement, the hero's sharp blade hits the creature's neck in a ruthless way. The warrior executes a deadly blow, neutralizing the demon commander definitively. With the impact, the villain's lifeless body is thrown back while the portal begins to fluctuate. Out of breath and covered in blood, the hero falls to his knees, feeling the massive tiredness of using so much mana. At that, the opponent's remains fall directly inside the magical rift, which glows in an uncontrolled way. Desperate, the red-haired warrior shouts her friend's name upon seeing the danger the portal represents. Meanwhile, on the other side of the portal, a large army of monsters anxiously awaits the invasion. The demon sorcerer celebrates, stating that the portal is stable and that the operation was a success. The army general orders everyone to prepare to march as soon as his subordinate returns. The proud general comments with a smile from the corner of his mouth that his younger brother would never fail the mission. Suddenly, the magical rift begins to glow intensely, drawing the attention of all the soldiers. At that, one of the subordinates celebrates, shouting that his esteemed commander is returning. But everyone goes silent upon seeing a human boot calmly cross the entrance of that glowing portal. The warrior in blue appears alone before the gigantic enemy army with his blade in hand. The demon general widens his eyes, completely horrified upon realizing that that is not his brother. With an imposing posture, the young man in blue stares at the crowd of monsters, revealing the fate of his rival. With contempt, the young man throws the proof of his victory to the ground, completely silencing the camp. The object rolls on the dirt under the startled looks of all the soldiers of that division. At that, the general and his troops observe, in absolute shock, the proof that their leader was outperformed. At that moment, the demon general widens his blue eyes in complete shock upon seeing what happened. Behind him, the soldiers begin to sweat coldly, murmuring, unable to believe what they are seeing there. At that, the defeated commander's head is displayed fallen on the ground, leaving the army terrified. The guards shout desperately, not understanding how a human boy managed to beat a powerful class. With his head lowered, the hero in blue stands firm while the monsters wonder who he really is. With that, one of the soldiers turns to the leader in panic, asking what the combat orders are now, but the demon general just gnashes his teeth in absolute silence, feeling fury dominate his mind. Then, the furious leader shouts with hatred, demanding to know what the meddler did to his younger brother. Before the immense pink portal, the young man in blue faces the entire enemy group alone without showing fear. At that, the warrior breathes with a lot of difficulty because of the extreme tiredness from the previous battle. He focuses his serious look, thinking that he already expected to find demons, but the situation is much worse. But the protagonist did not imagine that there would be an entire army of monsters gathered in that location. Sweating coldly, the boy realizes that he spent almost all his energy and will not be able to fight for a long time. Furious, the white-haired general shouts, pointing at the young man, refusing to accept that terrible audacity. Drawing his sword, the monster swears he will tear the invader apart right there to avenge his subordinate. The villain keeps ranting, saying he will eliminate all his friends and the humans of the entire kingdom. Listening to the threats, the young man in blue just closes his eyes in silence, trying to maintain his calm. At that, the boy tells the leader to try his luck, leaving the opponent quite confused by so much audacity. Mockingly, the hero asks if they really thought the kingdom did not know about that headache of theirs. He smiles, warning that hundreds of elite knights await them, ready to annihilate them without mercy. Terrified, one of the subordinates hesitates, remembering that their strong commander really was defeated. The horned general repeats about the royal army, appearing to evaluate the weight of that information closely. Meanwhile, the hero tries to hide the trembling of his hands, holding the sword with his remaining strength. But the evil leader flashes a sadistic smile, wondering if those troops really are out there. At that, the commander orders them to bring the artifact, leaving the servant quite startled by that decision. The young man in blue widens his eyes and begins to sweat coldly, feeling that something very bad is about to happen. At that moment, one of the guards begins to push a large wooden cart with a lot of effort. With that, the hero in blue becomes completely paralyzed upon noting the immense object brought by them. He realizes that that gigantic glass sphere carries an absurd amount of concentrated mana. The monster laughs, saying he intended to use that as a bargaining chip, but the plans changed for good. Then, the leader states that he will turn the entire kingdom into a true sea of burning flames. Startled, the servant warns that they do not have permission from the superiors, but the general tells him to shut his mouth. Squeezing the subordinate's shoulder, he explains that they are facing a massive crisis against the kingdom. With an insane look, the commander states that the monster's high council will understand the change of plans. At that, the boy sweats from dread, fearing that the rivals have discovered his bluff about the royal army. He focuses his eyes on the huge glowing sphere, understanding that that actually is a destructive bomb. The young man imagines that if that artifact explodes, the entire surrounding region will be completely devastated. With that, he understands that the portal was created specifically to transport that device. Gnashing his teeth with a lot of hatred, the warrior curses the monsters for such military cowardice. Then, the commander orders them to throw the young man, along with the artifact, through the portal to explode the kingdom. Several enemy soldiers begin to push the immense glowing cargo toward the dimensional rift. Under the leader's command, the entire army advances running in mass to invade the other side of the portal. The hero in blue prepares himself, knowing he needs to stop that terrible advance in any way from then on. He remembers the tragedy of his childhood, swearing that he will not allow the same horror to happen again. But suddenly, 3 enemies leap against him, forcing the young man to defend himself without strength to fight. Suddenly, a magical crash echoes in the hall, making the young man look up in complete shock. He turns around startled, feeling a colossal wave of energy appear right behind him at that instant. Leaping from above, the muscular redhead reappears with her large hammer, accompanied by her other allies. Smiling, she shouts, apologizing for the delay, explaining that it took time to find a new weapon. At that, the trio delivers a devastating attack together, knocking out several opponents all at once. At that moment, the companions warn that they will hold off the lesser soldiers for him to focus on the evil leader. With that, the warrior in blue gives a confident smile upon realizing that he will not need to fight alone. Then, the young man runs toward the target, determined to bet all his chips on that final blow. But the demon general shouts furiously upon noting the bluff, realizing that that was not the elite royal troop. Concentrating his remaining mana on the blade, the young man knows he will have only one chance to hit the opponent. Shouting with all his strength, the hero in blue advances through the air, discharging all his accumulated power. With impressive speed, the boy runs directly against the immense magical bomb of the rival army. The sharp edge of his weapon collides against the strong magical barrier, generating an immense discharge of energy. At that, the evil commander gives a mocking laugh, stating that no one could scratch the artifact. Suddenly, the metal blade begins to crack under the tremendous pressure of the sphere's protective shield. But the demon general widens his eyes upon noting that his magical barrier is beginning to rupture. With a lot of determination, the hero breaks the shield, forcing his sword directly against the glass surface. Terrified, the soldiers with horns go into panic, not understanding how a human broke that defense. Glowing cracks spread quickly through the entire structure of the opponent's immense mana bomb. At that moment, the huge artifact shatters completely, releasing all the accumulated energy in the place. Smiling a lot, the young man in blue celebrates, seeing that his desperate plan finally worked there. Desperate, the guards begin to flee, running upon realizing that the device is about to explode. In shock, the general remains completely static while the immense blinding light fills the entire hall. The monster leader trembles with dread upon understanding that the human boy really can control so much mana. With the strong impact of the destruction, the protagonist is thrown far away, sliding along the stone floor. At that, the warrior tries to move but realizes that his legs no longer respond due to extreme tiredness. The young man understands that he pushed his physical limits too much, using more mana than his body could endure. Suddenly, the boy in blue widens his eyes upon feeling that the large dimensional rift changed its flow. At that instant, the immense pink portal begins to collapse in a violent way, releasing waves of energy. The hero watches that frighteningly destructive scene, knowing he has no strength to escape from there. Suddenly, several friendly hands appear from the middle of the debris, holding the young man in blue firmly. With that, the adventurers leap back through the magical gate seconds before the dimensional collapse. A colossal explosion of golden light consumes the entire dungeon, destroying the stone structure of the place. The demon general watches the end of his plans, being totally swallowed by the glow of the detonation. At that, the terrible shockwave cracks the mountains, causing everything around to collapse for good. On the other side in the human dungeon, the dimensional portal also begins to glow in an uncontrolled way. At that moment, the 4 warriors are thrown out of the portal, falling straight onto the hard ground. Completely exhausted, the young hero closes his eyes, fainting right after that spectacular escape. Slowly, the boy's vision darkens completely while his consciousness fades into the darkness. In absolute silence, the young man lets out some groans of pain while trying to regain his senses. Suddenly, the protagonist opens his eyes confused, realizing that he is bandaged and lying in a bed. Sitting up slowly, the young man remembers his fainting, thinking that this situation has already happened in the past. At that, steps echo through the room, and a calm voice comments about the relief of seeing the young man awake there. The hero recognizes Agent Walter, who explains that the teammates brought him to the capital. With a serious posture, the man apologizes, saying they did not expect the presence of such a strong monster. He reveals that he has already heard the details from the allies about the enemy's plans to open that portal. The informant gives thanks, stating that the dangerous secret weapon of the monsters was stopped thanks to the boy. Bowing, the spy gives thanks on behalf of everyone, but the young man rejects the merits, praising his friends. Worried, the protagonist asks if the mage, the red-haired warrior, and the dwarf are okay after the great escape. The man nods, asking for calm, because everyone has already recovered, and they are hidden for safety reasons. The boy in blue complains in his mind, not understanding the reason they need to hide after the victory. At that, the agent changes the tone of conversation, revealing that he did not come there just to give thanks. The warrior in blue widens his eye upon hearing that the hooded individual has a special proposal for him. With a serious look, the royal spy decides to go straight to the main point of that conversation with the young man. Then, the man makes the official invitation, calling the hero in blue to become a knight of the kingdom. The agent praises the hero's combat talent, stating that the superiors see a lot of potential in him. With that, he explains that many wish to appoint him as an official knight to recognize his deeds. Thoughtfully, the young man in blue scratches his chin, evaluating if he should accept that large and rare opportunity there. At that, the warrior gives a slight laugh, appearing to already have a well-defined decision in his mind about this. But the boy rejects the invitation immediately, leaving the informant completely shocked by the answer. He begins to get dressed, saying that the real intentions of the royal superiors with him are too obvious. The man becomes quite surprised and asks what exactly the young man in blue is trying to say with that. Walking slowly, the hero states that the entire kingdom is going through serious combat difficulties. The young man confronts the agent, saying that the humans are being cornered in the war against the demons. Walter sweats coldly upon realizing that the boy managed to decipher the grave political situation with ease. He explains that he found it strange to send common adventurers for such a dangerous mission in the capital. The boy deduces that the mission was a cover-up because the kingdom simply has no more soldiers to fight. At that, the protagonist accuses the agent of being desperate, trying to use him just as a battle shield. The boy warns that he will not serve as a shield for nobles and walks to the exit door of that room. But the spy fires back that the title would help the hero in blue on his personal journey against the demons. The young man responds coldly, stating that he will decide the way he conducts his personal revenge. Walter observes him leave in silence, calling the boy by his true name in a focused way. At that, the man does not deny that the kingdom goes through a very grave crisis of lack of soldiers in the battle. But he explains that they do not give the title to just anyone because they believe that the hero in blue is necessary. He promises not to interfere with the boy's methods, but warns that many eyes are already focused on him. The protagonist just maintains his firm posture, analyzing the royal spy's warning in absolute silence. Meanwhile, the morning sun's rays illuminate the busy streets of the kingdom's grand capital. Walking through the city, the young man in blue is surprised upon spotting a familiar figure in the surroundings. The blonde Cheryl awaits him leaning against the stone wall with a serious posture and her arms crossed. Smiling, the boy asks if she came to get him, confessing to being quite touched by the attitude. But the blonde partner just stares at him with a focused countenance and without flashing any smile. The young man in blue gets awkward with that cold reaction and asks the reason for being stared at like that. She comments that he looks very well after the combat with demons and begins to walk in silence. The blonde heiress tells her friend to follow her, explaining that she needs to stop by a local establishment. A short time later, the two friends enter a large hall surrounded by various metal weapons. Intrigued, the protagonist looks around, realizing they are inside a familiar weapons shop. The girl explains that her father ordered a new sword of high quality to be prepared for the young hero. At that, the boy accepts the gift gladly, thinking about what type of blade he should choose there. With that, the experienced blacksmith of the place approaches and greets them, asking what they are looking for. The boy in blue asks if there is a strong weapon capable of enduring a mana flow greater than the aura. But the seller gestures, saying he does not possess such rare and expensive blades in his small shop. The partner reprimands him playfully, telling him not to go overboard with his luxurious requests. While they choose a common sword, a green-haired figure observes them from afar in secret. The mysterious individual hides behind the wooden column, guarding the steps of the duo of friends. Later, the group arrives in front of an immense and luxurious white stone mansion in the royal capital. The polite butler serves tea for the young people, asking them to await the arrival of the lord of the house. Cheryl comments that the local lord is extremely busy, making any type of common visit difficult. At that moment, the hero in blue hears a strange noise and looks curiously in the direction of the window. He spots a large army of knights in silver armor gathered in the courtyard of the residence. Surprised, the hero asks if they are from the Empire of Esknoa, and his friend confirms in a thoughtful way. The blonde explains that the imperial officers wanted to hear the combat report directly from the hero. In this, the Empire of Eshno controls most of the humans' lands across the entire continent. The Grand Empire also possesses the strongest and most ruthless military army on the entire planet. With that, the Empire is the only large nation capable of forming world-class legendary warriors. Suddenly, the heavy double door opens, drawing the immediate attention of the blue-haired protagonist. The redhead Revi appears with a beautiful military uniform, giving a welcome with a smile after a long time. At that moment, the partner in blue gives thanks with a polite smile for the hostess's warm reception. Talking friendly, the young man in blue comments that his friend seems much more mature and elegant now. With that, the hero celebrates the reunion, admitting that it has been very difficult to see each other lately. He comments with friendliness that the young lady in the red uniform must have gone through many challenges in the court, but the girl just smiles, saying that her work as a local administrator makes her remember her deceased father. At that, the redhead decides to go straight to the point, explaining that she needs to hear the details about the enemy invasion. Then, the warrior decides to tell everything from the beginning, detailing the battle against the bandits in the forest. Listening to the gossip, the young lady in red concludes shocked that the monsters already controlled the center of the kingdom. With a serious countenance, she realizes the real reason she received the invitation to travel to the great empire. Noting the sudden silence, the boy in blue worries and asks if he ended up saying something wrong there. But the redhead just asks for sincere apologies, revealing that she needs to ask a very important favor of him. The young man in blue gets completely startled upon hearing that he must accompany her to the empire to meet the hero. A short time later, an immense and bright blue magical portal is activated in the center of the city's large plaza. Wearing a beautiful blue gala uniform, the young man crosses the magical rift, appearing imposingly on the other side. With a focused look, the protagonist in blue carefully observes the grand and new region around. Before his eyes rises a gigantic stone castle surrounded by a magnificent royal architecture. He realizes the colossal grandiosity of the famous empire of Eshno while walking through the paved streets. Suddenly, the warrior hears a faint groan of pain coming right behind him and turns his head quickly. He finds the red-haired partner dizzy and nauseous because of the heavy magical journey through the mana rift. Sweating coldly, the young lady tries to stand firm on her feet, regaining her balance in a slightly clumsy way. Around them, nobles dressed in luxurious clothes stroll happily through the clean plazas of that metropolis. The redhead comments on the incredible peace of the location, which represents the top of all humanity's civilization. At that, she says it is difficult to believe that there is still a bloody war occurring in other parts of the world. But the protagonist in blue looks away thoughtfully, questioning if they really are safe acting like this. He points out that they are only 5 people in total, with him being the only warrior responsible for protection. The young lady explains that bringing an army of bodyguards would generate unnecessary suspicions for the mission. Suddenly, a refined individual appears in their path, blocking the passage with a polite posture. The newcomer introduces himself as Marquis Esdal, offering himself gladly as an official guide in the capital. With a noble posture, the red-haired partner returns the greeting, thanking him for the warm, personal reception. The Marquis points curiously at the young warrior, and the young lady explains that he is her personal bodyguard. At that, the imperial guide narrows his golden eyes, analyzing the boy in blue with quite a bit of suspicion. The hero gives an awkward laugh, trying to disguise the discomfort of being stared at in such an analytical way. But the Marquis just smiles, inviting the group to enter the elegant carriage prepared for the journey. The girl gives thanks happily while the protagonist follows him, appearing quite suspicious of everything. In silence, the young man wonders what exactly his friend meant about meeting the legendary hero. Inside the carriage, the young lady reveals that the Empire did not invite her just to hear the report of the invasion. She explains that the Imperials want her to help in the training of the chosen hero for an entire week. The young man gets very surprised, asking the reason for wanting the magical support of that girl of all people. Crossing his arms, the boy complains in a grumpy way, thinking that all of that is just a foolish display. But suddenly, the young man in blue widens his eye upon, putting all the pieces together and understanding the hidden truth. He realizes that the Empire is displaying its greatest combat force before a kingdom that is weak. With a serious countenance, the protagonist concludes that that movement actually is a warning. The young lady agrees, saying that it is a subtle threat to show who holds the greatest fighting power. The young man in blue makes a face, commenting on the political petness of that large imperial force. She fears that the imperial generals have the secret plan to dominate their small kingdom in the future. Observing the landscape through the window, the boy becomes quite worried about that terrible revelation of hers. A short time later, the carriage stops before the gates of the immense and respected Academy of Alios. At that, the adventure duo walks through the sumptuous and bright internal corridor of that royal school. The young man in blue gets marveled, thinking that the location is much fancier than everything he saw before. At that moment, the redhead lets out a joyful shout upon spotting a familiar figure approaching her. She runs excited to hug the bearded master, while the young man in blue just observes the scene. Laughing with friendliness, the young lady comments that the old mage remains the same as always despite the past years. With that, the partner introduces the old man, explaining that he was the tutor who taught her sorcery in her childhood. The robust professor introduces himself officially as Ragnall, extending his hand to greet the young man. At that, the boy shakes his hand, quite impressed with the excessively strong physique of the mage. The old man gives a big laugh, commenting that he has already heard a lot about the warrior's fame. Smiling, the hero comments that the elder is too muscular for a simple user of sorcery. Amused, the professor just laughs a lot, stating that a sound mind also requires a very strong body. Then, the tutor warns that he will give total support to both during their stay at the Grand Military School. A short time later, the group gathers in the immense, paved central courtyard of the famous Imperial Academy. The master with the beard asks if everyone has arrived, but the instructor responds that the Imperial hero is late. Sighing, the elder massages his forehead, furious with the unjustifiable delay of the Empire's young prodigy. Behind him, some students complain annoyed, saying that the arrogant redhead's ego went beyond all limits. The boy in blue just observes that gossip from afar, realizing that the climate there is quite heavy. He wonders about the reason for such a tense and unfavorable environment for a place that houses a hero. Suddenly, a mocking voice echoes through the plaza, apologizing with a lot of sarcasm for his delay. At that, the young man in blue and his partner turn their heads quickly upon feeling the new presence in the courtyard. The orange-haired boy appears careless, arms around two beautiful girls of elf appearance by his side. Shocked, the hero in blue stares at that foolish attitude, thinking that the rival looks more like a common delinquent. He focuses his look on the red-haired individual, unable to believe that that braggart is the savior of the Empire. Meanwhile, the young lady just observes the newcomer maintain an extremely snobbish and arrogant posture. The arrogant redhead approaches her, commenting with disdain that she will be his new training partner. But upon seeing the administrator bow in a polite way, the orange-haired boy gets dazzled. At that, the redhead invites the young lady to go out after training, leaving the warrior visibly uncomfortable. With total boldness, the opponent places his hand on the young lady's shoulder, suggesting they spend the night at a local bar. Suddenly, the hero in blue appears, blocking the bold one by holding his wrist with extreme violence. The young man of the Empire widens his blue eyes, surprised at being interrupted in such an abrupt way from there. With a dark and frightening look, the young man in blue asks if the opponent wishes to die right there. The entire crowd of students and Ragnall himself become completely paralyzed with that provocation. Flashing a dangerous smile, the arrogant redhead questions if the meddler knows who he is talking to. Without backing down, the boy in blue increases the strength of the grip on his wrist, demonstrating total superiority. But suddenly, the redhead gives a laugh, saying in an ironic way the newcomer has quite a bit of courage. The challenger stares at the young lady, asking who that guy is, and she reveals him to be her personal bodyguard. The redhead amuses himself, commenting that the warriors of the other kingdoms always trembled with dread before him. The protagonist stares at him coldly, telling the braggart to demonstrate basic respect for the ruler. At that moment, Master Ragnall intervenes, ordering the young people to stop the fight, because they need to train. He touches the shoulder of the boy in blue, asking for calm so that he does not let emotions dominate reason. Next, the elder scolds the redhead, reminding him that good manners are part of being a hero. With a sharp look, the protagonist in blue just swallows his anger, determined to give payoff at the right time. At that, the instructor tries to break the ice, officially announcing the start of the training activities. The redhead makes a beautiful bow to the students, introducing herself in a quite humble and polite way. But the students begin to whisper maliciously, remembering that her family was wiped out in the war. Listening to the malicious comments, the girl just lowers her eyes, trying to ignore the insults from there. To end the rumors, The old professor orders the assistants to prepare the practical combat arena. The assistant with glasses touches the ground, activating a beautiful and bright magical summoning circle in the arena. With that, an immense blue energy begins to rise from the center of the courtyard, spreading mana all over the courtyard. Suddenly, a gigantic luminous pillar of energy rises from the soil, leaving everyone quite surprised. At that, the blue training barrier expands, creating a floating virtual arena for the battle. Finally, the magical simulation structure completes itself, covering the entire central courtyard of the academy. At that moment, a bright square barrier forms on the ground, emitting waves of blue mana through the arena. The young man in blue looks at the sky, surprised upon noting a gigantic, bright circle floating over them. At that, the instructor explains that the device is an imperial technology used to simulate real battles. Quite confused, the young man in blue asks about the illusions, but the man says it is easier to see in practice. With that, the master with the beard announces the start of the combat, ordering the fighters to generate their weapons. Suddenly, a bright sword made of pure blue light appears directly in the hands of the young combatant. At the same time, the girl summons her magical staff of pink light that begins to emit bright particles. The boy in blue gets very shocked to see that they managed to create real armaments out of absolute nothing. Then the old master lowers his hand quickly, giving the official signal for the confrontation to begin soon. With extreme agility, the swordsman advances, delivering a swift blow with his bluish energy weapon, but the opponent reacts quickly, charging a large golden magical circle on the tip of her staff. At that, the mage leaps through the air, firing an immense blast of golden energy directly against the ground. The young warrior dodges with impressive agility, keeping his bluish blade ready to attack. With a precise diagonal movement, the swordsman delivers a glancing blow against the rival's waist. From the outside, the protagonist watches at point-blank range, fascinated by the tremendous combat speed. He gets very tense upon noting that the two seem to be fighting with real intent to destroy each other. Suddenly, the young man's foot slides on the ground, making him lose his balance in the middle of his quick onslaught. Taking advantage of the opening, the blonde sorceress advances with a smile on her face, charging her maximum power. She fires a devastating spell that hits the opponent squarely, generating a strong fire explosion. Terrified, the boy in blue shouts, thinking that the blow destroyed the rival, but the man tells him to just observe. At that moment, the body of the hit young man begins to break down into several digital light particles. But right after, the young man reappears completely intact, just grumbling for losing the fight. Raising his arm, the master with the beard ends the simulated combat, declaring the young mage as the winner. The hero in blue asks what just happened, and the guide explains that everything was generated by the ring of light. He explains that the device reads the user's thoughts, turning his mind into a real projection. At that, the system simulates with precision the weapons, the spells, and even the real pains of each injury. With this, students can train in a totally safe way, gaining real combat experience. The boy gets marveled with the technology, noting that their magical distance to the kingdom is immense. The assistant suggests that the red-haired partner fight, but the tutor asks for rest because of the tiredness of the trip. But the helper sweats from nervousness, revealing that that simulated fight is a direct order from the Marquis. Hearing that, the master with the beard scowls, appearing quite annoyed with that royal requirement. The experienced professor turns his head, looking directly at the upper boxes of the arena. He spots Marquis Esdal standing on the balcony, observing all the movement with a look of mockery. At that moment, an important and mysterious female figure approaches the nobleman, asking about the fight. The Marquis responds with disdain, stating that he ordered a strong warrior to face the administrator. He focuses his look on the opponent with platinum hair, determined to test the real skills of the kingdom. Sitting on the reserve bench, the two friends await the start of the next confrontation with much seriousness. At that, the young redhead maintains a focused posture, knowing she cannot run away from that challenge. Furious, the tutor states that the Imperial's plan is too obvious and decides to intervene personally in the fight. But suddenly, the redhead stands up with a clenched fist and swears she will accept the simulated combat there. The master with the beard tries to stop her, but the young lady just smiles, saying she is perfectly fine to fight. She stares at him in a confident way, reminding the professor that it was he himself who trained her in the past. With that, the instructor announces the entrance of the adversary and orders everyone to prepare for the duel. The blonde with braids asks if she needs to hold back, but the arrogant hero tells her to do whatever she wants. The arrogant redhead gives a mocking wink, stating that the only one who awakens his interest is someone else. With a sideways glance, the redhead focuses his attention entirely on the figure of the boy in blue right there. The young man in blue warns her about the danger, but the redhead responds that they already knew about the imperial intentions. Then the girl takes off her military gala coat, determined to face that combat head on with everything.